All right. Good. Is it good? Just need to confirm something here. Good evening, everyone. I've been having a series of I've been having some challenges when it comes to my connection. So I'm hoping that you can hear me just fine, and also that you can probably see my screen. I'll ask if you could help by, I guess, doing one of those thumbs up or something. If you can hear me just fine, and also if you can see my screen. Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is a bit strange. I'm not really sure why my connection seems to be acting up. Okay, so we are going to continue our I think it's our discussion of 1519, I think it is, and we today I thought would continue by again looking at very basics here, elementary stuff, right? We haven't really got into a stage where we started I suppose digging into the actual details, but I've always thought that providing some kind of contextual overview usually does help, I suppose, and I'm hoping it's going to be the case for this group. The challenge, like I said last time, is that we are dealing with a very diverse group of individuals, and which is a good thing, really, because we expect quite a bit of input, especially from our doctoral students, right? Most of you certainly have experience or expertise when it comes to conducting scientific research, and yes, I think our focus here is on scientific research, and so we will rely on your input by way of engaging in discourse, right? I think it would be nice for us to have some engagement as we're interacting, but that's just me. I don't know. So anyways, I'm just trying to see if I can find my way here and just dump this thing in here, and then we can start, I suppose. Not knowing if there are any thoughts or questions. I know there was a colleague who reached out to me to request that I share the slide deck and perhaps a course outline or something. I do apologize that I haven't really sent that out yet, but I will, right after this class, I will send out. I'll send out the slide deck, and also, I suppose, course outline or something like that. Okay, so and in fact, I think I should have probably just created a completely new slide deck, but I decided to merge trivia and course introduction into one. Hopefully, this is not going to be very confusing here. But anyway, so when we met last time, we looked at part 1 all the way up to part 3, if you remember. Towards the end of our most recent interaction, we glossed over the postgraduate guidelines as they relate to the UNZA, a very, very important piece of document. If I were you, I would bookmark the URL on the Directorate of Research and Graduate Studies website, where you find, I guess, the current version of the postgraduate guidelines, just in case the guidelines change, right? As you are embarking upon your doctoral studies or your master's work or research, if you will. So we did that, and just to mention that as we are covering these other, if I should, yeah, as we're covering, these other more specific aspects of the course itself, or the stages of research, we will definitely revisit these things. I'm surprised that my plugin is not working. This thing is telling me that there are people that are waiting to be admitted. I don't understand what is happening here. It's very odd. To apologize for the. There we go. I literally switched this thing on, but and I added myself as a host, but it appears it's not working. So I'll context switch occasionally. I do apologize for that. But hopefully things will stabilize very, very soon. It's fine. Yeah, hopefully. Okay. Anyway, so if I were you, I would actually bookmark this very, very important document, right? Now, I thought I would start off by dispelling, I guess, this misrepresentation that exists out there insofar as the goings on in Zambia are concerned, right? Usually, discussion of mainstream research is typically reserved for academia. This has been my experience in Zambia, right? It's quite sad, really. And I say it's sad because I know that amongst us are very, very important people, okay? Individuals that probably occupy management level positions or middle management level positions. So we are hoping here that they're not enrolled in their doctoral program or master's program just as an academic exercise so that they can get that qualification at the end of it. Or our hope is always that we get to a stage where we see mainstream research actually being conducted in industry. Again, I say this because there are quote unquote what we may call trivial problems, right, that have been with us for many, many years, right? I always like using an example of spam messages that we continuously receive here. I don't know if your typical, I guess, private entity out there like MTN and Airtel has a dedicated R&D wing, right? And development wing whose sole purpose is to actually conduct research, right? Not just market research to try and figure out exactly how to probably increase their revenue here, but looking at these problems that afflict us. But anyway, what we begin to notice really, if we look at these government ministries and perhaps departments, is that there's actually quite a bit of rigorous research that goes on there. So what I have on my current slide here is what the Ministry of Education calls the Education Statistics Bulletin. And so what the Ministry of Education does on an annual basis, literally every year, is they do a comprehensive study, or they conduct research. And interestingly enough, I think some of the things that they do, at least in terms of collecting information about the different schools dotted across the country, is what Professor Piri is going to refer to as a census, is it? So when you're collecting data, there's always this question that you have got to answer, right? Where are you going to collect the data from? Okay. And typically, it's not always feasible for you to collect data from all possible participants. Okay. So what you do is you sample, you collect or you identify or you come up with what's typically called a representative sample. Okay. I believe what they do in the Education Statistics Bulletin, and I'm saying I believe here because I've forgotten, but actually it's actually here. If you notice here, the 2024 census, right? So it's a census actually. I was going to say I've forgotten because I last went through this document. I think is it before last year or something? This was got in 2024. Oh, this was from 2025, but it was from the year before. Okay. So the data in this particular case is collected using what's called a census. This is meaning that If you look at it from the perspective of the schools, because they collect this data from the schools, in essence, they went around each and every primary and secondary school at the time. I don't think that they included, the early childhood education component here. Okay, so they go out, flat out, they distribute questionnaires in all the schools and then they collect the data. This is actually what typically happens also when we have what society in Zambia commonly calls census, but more to put it's a census of housing and population, right? So Zambia Statistics Agency will go out there, right, and they will conduct research, is it? Their research is in the form of them, Zambia Statistics Agency, they rebranded. Apparently, I don't know here, I don't know if we have somebody from Zambia Statistics Agency here, but apparently they go to each and every household in the Republic and they collect data from each and every household. I don't know, right? If this is what they typically do, but we do know that there's quite a bit of money that is directed towards that. Okay, so the long and short of it here is trying to put across this notion that we see that research is actually not the preserve of academia, but we actually see it manifest itself in society itself, right? Especially government. A number of important decisions made by government are rooted in research. Besides this education statistic bulletin, which by the way is a very interesting publication at your own time, you may probably want to take a look at it, right? Because it gives you an idea of what is actually going on in these schools, right? So primary and secondary schools, ideally. The part that I normally like paying particular attention to is the breakdown of, and I don't know if I included this detail, ICT infrastructure in these schools, if you will. But anyway, I included this slide because I wanted to kind of put this important point across, right? That we are not learning how to do research because we want to get our doctoral degrees or our master's degrees, but we're trying to perfect the art of research so that when we go out there, be it in the public sector or the private sector, we actually put into practice these things that we are doing. Quite a lot of things happening besides the census of housing and population. I also like referring, and I'm probably going to refer to what's called the Zambia demographic the Zambia Demographic and Health Survey. Pretty interesting study is conducted. In this particular case, it's not really a census per se, but what they do is they sample. Now, I'm going to maybe just try and draw attention to specific interesting aspects of this report, I guess. Maybe I should download it. And then I can attempt to put my point across here. There's usually things that will be thrown around, right? They'll tell us that interesting things like if I'll be able to find what I'm looking for here. They'll tell us a number of interesting things here, like wow, this is interesting. The DH. Sure, this is here. Okay, sorry about that. But they'll tell us interesting things like, oh, we see that is it 70% of Zambia's population lives in abject poverty or something like that, right? And many a times people will not really appreciate where all of this information comes from, right? Or they'll tell you that the fertility rate, maybe let's look at fertility rate here. The fertility rate in Zambia, in the Republic of Zambia, is, I'm just going to go to page number 87. I've forgotten what it is here. We are not as worse off as these other countries like Japan. which arguably apparently are dying off, right? If you've been following up on some of these things. So they'll tell us that the fertility rate is at a certain level here. But it turns out that the way that they determine all these different things is through research, right? And what is especially interesting is that if you look at the methodology of if I'll find 87, if you look at the methodology that is employed, right, in a study like this, then you begin to appreciate, right, the reason why understanding how research is important. Okay, incidentally, apparently the total fertility rate in Zambia is at 4 children, right, per woman, which is really, really good, I guess. Usually it's good if the number of people that are being born are more than those that are dying, right, in a given year or something like that. But if you, again, this is a very detailed document, about 717 pages, if you will. But if you, and there are different aspects to do with this, right? Fertility, the focus on specific illnesses like HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and all those things. But if you look at, you begin to appreciate the importance of research when you go to the very first bit of this report, right? What I think is tagged as introduction and survey methodology in here. And it turns out that if you look at the sample design on page number 1, it turns out that for them to draw conclusions as they relate to maybe the fertility rate, for instance, what these guys did, or what these people did, what they do, because they do this on a regular basis, is they essentially identify a representative sample, right? So for this this particular version of the Zambia Demographic Household and Health Survey here, what they did is they, and I'm trying to see if I can get to the sample design, I guess this would be important. So what they did is they got they got a total of, this is going to say here, I don't know if we'll be able to find the actual details here. Questionnaire distributed to, I guess we can just restrict ourselves to here. So they looked at a total of 36,770 enumeration areas, ideally, okay? And they just clustered them into urban and rural areas. So in essence, the entire information that is in this report, or the conclusions that are drawn, are based from this sample size, I mean, this representative sample that they identified, right? Anyways, besides this, we also have, and I guess if we were to look at examples that are closer to home, we also see that entities like ZICTA, for instance, ZICTA will conduct some really interesting publications, right? Literally, yesterday, I think it was, I don't know if it was this morning, I saw some interesting report about how the volume of mobile money transactions has actually significantly increased, right? One wonders exactly how they would have done that. So entities like ZICTA, for instance, would do these sort of studies. Anyway, so the long and short of it here is that, you know, research is everywhere. And so it becomes important, especially when we are undertaking these advanced, you know, degrees, for us to understand exactly how research ought to be conducted, okay? I will throw in some of these examples as we go on, especially those that I think are going to be relevant, right? At your own time, I do encourage you to probably go through the education statistics bulletin, if you will. Okay. But before we kind of zero in into this, what we're calling introduction, it becomes important for us to appreciate what research is, right? I guess your textbook definition here and provided appropriate citations as expected in research here. So Theoderson, right? Theoderson and Theoderson cite Reba, right? And they state that research is actually is defined as an honest attempt to study a problem systematically or to add to man's knowledge of the problem. Okay, and then if you look at Elias' definition of research, he states that the aim, as far as I can see, is the same as in all science. Put simply and curiously, the aim is to make known something previously unknown to human beings. It is to advance human knowledge, to make it more certain and better fitting. Now, you know, if you pause here and you kind of dissect these two different, seemingly different definitions of what research is, you begin to notice that there's something common amongst these definitions, right? But I want to draw attention to the important aspects in each of these two definitions here. So the first bit here is an attempt to study a problem systematically. And it turns out that when you're conducting your master's dissertation research or doctoral research, one of the things that's going to come up over and over again is the importance of being systematic. Okay, you will notice that when you're doing your literature review, your supervisor will probably emphasize the importance of you making sure that you clearly state exactly how you are searching for your literature sources. So in all likelihood, you'll be told to say in your as you are kind of providing an introduction to your literature review or something. What you want to do is you want to state exactly what sort of inclusion and exclusion criteria you use, right? So you will come across dissertations where students will indicate to say, we issued queries into Google Scholar, the following are the queries. And what we did was we filtered the results by looking at studies that were done in the last 5 years or something like that, okay? And so in addition, what we did was we also went to the ACM Digital Library and we issued the same query and all those things. You're being systematic, right? And that's just at the literature review stage. When it comes to the methodology, you will be forced to do certain things, is it? You're expected, as you're outlining your methodology and more on that just now, to explicitly state things like how you arrived at the sample size. Okay, so if you look at the study that I was providing here, yeah, they're telling you to say, I don't know if they're telling you to say that their sampling frame was based on this census of population and housing that was conducted, I think it was back in 2022 or something like that. Okay, so using the numbers from the outcome of the census of population and housing, they were able to come up with a representative sample ideally. Of course, the other things that they're taking into account here, right? Things like the specific sampling techniques. I don't know if they provide this. So if you notice here in this last paragraph here, they say that the sample was stratified, is it, and selected in 2 stages. So when you have a discussion of methodologies with Professor Piri, he'll probably outline various types of sampling techniques that can be employed. Is it simple random sampling, stratified, random sampling, purposive sampling, convenience sampling, and all those things, right? Those are sampling techniques. And it turns out that when you're writing down your methodology, you have got to be systematic in the way that you are specifying the methodological aspects of your research. And really being systematic is linked to yet another important aspect of research, right? So this notion that research is supposed to be reproducible, okay? When you, let's say you're working on a study that is aimed at proposing, or a study that is aimed at understanding how people utilize mobile money. You're an information system student or something, and you're trying to understand exactly how Zambians use mobile money applications. The reason why you want to be systematic is so that if somebody wants to verify the results that you obtained from your study, they should be able to replicate what you did. And the only way they'll be able to replicate what you did is if you are systematic in terms of how you are describing what it is you did, right? The methodology. So the key word there, systematic, is quite important, right? And it also cascades down to how exactly you are collecting the data, right? What instruments you're using, right? They're established, expected ways of collecting data, right? Like questionnaires, interviews, workshops, observations, and all those things. And for each and every one of these different measurement instruments, there are expected ways of actually collecting data. In addition to that, there's the data analysis part, right? Like, for instance, if you're conducting, or if you conducted an empirical study where you were collecting data using some questionnaire or something, the expectation is that one of the things that you're going to do is going to systematically analyze this data by doing all those fancy things like descriptive statistics, and more important, inferential statistics, is it? Because one of the things that you are going to be doing is you're going to be wanting to generalize your findings. The fertility rate in Zambia is 4 kids or 4 children per female. You are generalizing. You didn't go flat out, go and check each and every female in Zambia and ask them how many kids do you have, and then you average out the numbers, right? You got a representative sample. But at the end of it all, you are able to generalize your findings because you are systematic in the way you conduct. So the keyword there is systematic, right? The other thing, right, the other keyword that I want to draw attention to, and this actually applies to our colleagues that are enrolled in doctoral studies here, is the part where we're setting to add to man's knowledge of a problem, is it? And it turns out that the definition is speaking to this issue of contributing to the body of knowledge, right? So you see that at some stage when we start looking at how we carve out problems and come up with research questions and all that, we look at characteristics of specific objectives and research questions. They must not be trivial. It's pointless for us to say, well, we're going to conduct a study here to find out how long it takes for someone to I guess to move from Unza to town or something like that, right? That's trivial. It's something that you can do in just like less than an hour or something like that. And you're not really going to be contributing anything meaningful, right? So 2 key things there, right? Adding, right, to the existing body of knowledge, or adding to man's knowledge, right? And so far as the problem is concerned, and then also being systematic. By the way, I have a funny story here. I don't know if you call it funny here, and I think most of you have already fallen into this trap, is it? If you're doing a master's by research program, you are working towards a tenet, is it a thesis? If you are pursuing doctoral studies, you're working towards a tenet as well, it's a thesis. And one of the things that your examiners are going to look at here is what is so novel about the research you conducted. Okay? In fact, the first question they're going to ask you when you're defending your thesis here, for some of you 3 years from now or something, some of you maybe less than that, is what is so novel about the research that you did. Now, I was saying I have a very funny story because sadly, I think it's sadly here, the way that most of our students will get around this is, I want to draw attention here to I hope I'll be able to find this here. This thing is taking a while here, which is quite unfortunate here. But maybe we can use Google Scholar also as well, because these things are indexed. Okay, it's here. One of the things that you'll notice, if you just do a simple audit of manuscripts produced by doctoral students, let's focus on doctoral students here, because this may not really apply on people that are working towards the dissertation, right? Is that most of them, I'm just going to do this here. Most of them, right? Most of these dissertations, and we can tell that something is a dissertation, by the way, if there's just one author, right? We know the repository has a whole range of things. The vast majority of these 7,000 things I'm searching for from the institutional repository for UNZA here are actually thesis and dissertation manuscripts. It's taking a while, so is Google Scholar. So this document here by F. Kakan, and I know F. Kakan is Mr. Fabian Kakan or something from 2010. This was probably his master's dissertation. Now, what you notice is that almost most of these things will have terms like in Zambia, in Eastern Province, right? Just pay particular attention to what's happening here. An evaluation of library support services for distance education students at the University of Zambia or something, right? In fact, if we were to do a test here, you'll find that almost each and every student will have a way, like in Zambia. In fact, I'm going to do a test here, say in title Zambia or something. Some of them may not really have Zambia. They may, so it's reduced to like 3,000 outcomes here. Some of them will probably have Eastern Province, a case of Muchinga Province. And I saw this in one of my students sent a concept note, right? There is in Muchinga Province. And the reason why people do that is you make the argument or the case that the results that you are obtaining are contextualized within a particular sub area, a particular area in this particular case. And you can easily argue, right, for the fact that, well, I'm contributing to the body of knowledge here because what I'm doing is specific to that particular area. I don't know about that, right? I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, you obviously pass. You can get away with this, really. But I just wanted to put across this point to say you almost always see things like Eastern Province and all that because people want to preempt that question that they will ask. What is so novel about what it is you did? Well, our research was focused on Muchinga Province for whatever reason here, or it was focused on Zambia because of these unique things about Zambia or Muchinga Province or something. Anyways, so and by the way, this issue of novelty is something that will haunt you if you're a doctoral student. It take a while before you can narrow down, what is so novel about what you're, doing here. But eventually, you'll probably narrow down to the contribution, right? Anyways, if you look at the definition from Elias here, right? Probably this is one of those few cases where you are citing decades-old literature, is it? It's not set of the art here, but you get the point. Anyway, so you notice from the definition from Elias here that there's a couple of, well, not really so many interesting things here, but I want to draw attention here at the fact that he states that the aim is to make known something previously unknown to human beings. And really, implicitly, what he's talking about here is you are adding to man's knowledge, is it? The existing body of knowledge, right? Like, for instance, let's see here. I don't know if we don't know to what extent AI is going to radically change Zambia as a society. We don't know, right? I mean, there's probably people that have conducted studies elsewhere in the world, right? Let's say as it relates to job security, for instance. But in Zambia right now, we don't know, is it? So that is unknown, right? We'll be adding to man's existing body of knowledge in that particular instance because we'll be contributing to an understanding of how AI will radically change the job market in Zambia or something like that. Maybe some of us that teach for a living will not be able to find jobs or something like that, right? And really, if you look at the other part here, it says it is, to advance human knowledge. The idea is the same, is it? If you don't know something, and somebody conducts a study, and people become enlightened, what you're doing is you're advancing, right, human knowledge. And it turns out that this issue of advancing human knowledge is very, very important, right? It's the reason why, if you look at computing, because most of us have background in computing, we've gotten into a stage where we have all these sophisticated computer systems around, right? All of us have probably a course where we looked at the history of computing from first generation. If you look at it from the perspective of those 5 generations, generation number 1 all the way up to number 5 here, in each generation, there was some contribution, is it? That ultimately, led us down to the path where we were able to design more sophisticated, more efficient and effective machines or computers. So we're advancing human knowledge. And in fact, if you look at what's currently prevailing, people talk about, quantum computers and all those things here. But the thing here is, irrespective of the definition of research that, somebody will come up with, it turns out that the focus is usually on contribution, right? Adding to the existing body of knowledge, ideally. There's a certain, I like using this as an example, I think, when it comes to, making known something previously unknown. I think there's somebody who was Secretary of State, I've forgotten who he was here. And I think there's a catchphrase, right, that he came up with. I don't know if he's the one who came up with that catchphrase or maybe just modified it, but something that you can apply to research is when we're talking about unknowns here. There are things, it says there are things that things we know, right? If you're looking at contributing body of knowledge, right, you better understand that the things that we know. There are things we know we don't know. Okay. We know that AI is going to radically change the way things are currently done here. We know that, right? We don't know if there are other habitable planets somewhere out there. So there are things we know we don't know. And usually these things, by the way, the things I'm talking about here would trigger what sort of research you're going to conduct, right? And what contribution is going to be. Apparently there are things we don't know we know, right? And then I always see this as actually being funny, really, but there are things we don't know we don't know, right? So if your research is focused on trying to figure out, right, some that is not yet known, right? Usually in mathematics, there are certain problems, notorious problems, right, that have been around for ages, and people are still looking for answers here. You'd be conducting a study to do precisely that. Anyways, so there's that. I don't know, things that we know we don't know. Secretary of State, I've forgotten this. Things we know we don't know something. Doing I think it was Ramsfield or something. And surprisingly here, there's even a Wikipedia page. We probably look it up here. Anyhow, so there's that, right? Research. Now, I want us to maybe just try and kind of redefine these, to kind of rephrase these two definitions somehow, right? I want to argue here that our working definition for research going forward, in fact, even including the parts that Professor Piri is going to lead here, would be that research is actually an organized and systematic way to find answers to questions. At some point, you're going to come up with research questions. Your goal is going to be to find answers to those research questions. Okay? And also just to mention here that logic is extremely important insofar as research is concerned. And thankfully enough, all of us, I don't know about colleagues that I know I have students, 2 students from Malawi, but in Zambia, as far as I'm concerned, all of us paper 2, so logic shouldn't really be a problem. And in fact, if you have the bachelor's degree in computing, you should be really good at logic. So the part where research is a creative process shouldn't really be so much of a problem. So research is an organized and systematic way of finding answers to questions. Finding answers to questions because you'll be contributing to knowledge. Organized and systematic because research is systematic like that. You know, I was debating when I was coming up with a plan on what we are going to cover for my part of this. In fact, if you look at the outline, there's something important that is not included, right? The thing that's tagged as organized here, planning, you know? And I see this as important really because at proposal stage, right, one of the things that you will be required to do is to provide proof that you've come up with a well-organized plan or a plan on how you're going to conduct this research. And what I typically find very, very sad myself is that, and I say sad here because almost all of students that I work with will fall into this trap, right? They'll come up with a plan, but their they're coming up with that plan because it's a requirement. Instead of seriously sitting down and organizing the different things that they anticipate are going to do as part of this research. So you'll find somebody with just half a page of a work plan, right? Like, if you do that, what you soon find is that 3 years down the line, you'll be nowhere close to the end here. So if I were you, the part to do with organization, maybe we can talk about project management at some point here. You want to be systematic, and maybe I can also try and see if I can showcase, maybe this is the part where I showcase my I showcase some of the things that I did here. I believe I may have shared what I want to showcase here with one of my past students here, because I always have these conversations with my research students. I remember we had quite the discussion here with Miss Tembo here. I don't know if I'll be able to find the timeline here, but I have very nice. I'll call this a very nice timeline really, because it is nice, really. Maybe exemplars. I don't know. I don't know if it's this. I think it is this. So if I was to fish out some examples of timelines that my past students have come up with, right? This is mostly master students. You notice that if you analyze their timeline, you begin to appreciate why somebody would grossly underestimate, right, how much work is required. So I always use this as an example. So when I was pursuing my doctoral studies, one of the very first things I did was I came up with this detailed timeline here. So from year number 1, right, all the way up to when I was anticipating I would finish this. So I had planned to conduct my doctoral studies within 3 years because I had constraints, right? My funding was just for 3 years. But if you look at this detailed timeline, you notice that it's so meticulous. It has everything, dependencies. It has all the, the milestones and the deliverables. And the beauty with coming up with something like this is it becomes a lot easier for you to approximate, to estimate. If you just have like a high level, if you're not well organized, if your research is not well organized from the perspective of project management, you will find yourself in a situation where you will grossly underestimate what it is you are expected to do here, right? So anyways, our working definition is research is an organized and systematic way of finding answers to questions. And by the way, when it comes to timelines, I always remind my students, and I guess I'm reminding you to say, if you're one of those people who is currently converting your concept note into a quote-unquote timeline, what you want to do is you want to revisit your introduction to software engineering, is it? Where they told you that before you randomly come up with a timeline, what you start off with is a work breakdown structure, right? So you decompose your project, right? You decompose it, you come up with a work breakdown structure, and then you use your work breakdown structure as input into to come up with a Gantt chart or something, a timeline, ideally. Anyways, so I guess other interesting questions to ask here now that we understand the definition of research here, and still tied to the definition itself, is why exactly do we bother conducting research, right? Well, for you, I guess it's to get that degree, and I understand that. Maybe you anticipate you're going to be promoted or something. Maybe you're planning to migrate somewhere, right? It's usually the case. Maybe you're trying to transition. You're tired of industry and you want to teach for a living, or you want to teach part-time and you realize that, for you to teach these advanced degrees, you need a PhD, right? That's your reason here. But besides your reason of doing this so that you get your degree here, it turns out that other reasons why we undertake research here is we want, or we'll be interested in investigating some existing situation or a problem. An existing situation or problem, I apologize for not offending people here, we have right now is we don't know who is going to carry the day, right? In August, we don't know who is going to win What we can do is we can conduct a study, research. A sort of research is typically, or it typically manifests itself in what they'll call opinion polls, is it? I don't know if people have already started doing these polls here, right? So I'll tell you, oh, we see that the incumbent is going to win or something, or a Tonsil Alliance is likely to win or whatever, right? So we'll be interested in investigating a situation, a problem. I wouldn't call that a problem, but I'll call it a situation. Is it want to know for whatever reason? I mean, if I'm part of the UPND or the Tonsil Alliance, for me to be able to know where I should exert most of my resources, what I would do is I would hire maybe a data scientist, right? Or a group of individuals that are going to analyze the data and tell me to say, your strongholds are here, your weakest points are here, so that you know that, oh, maybe we should exert more resources in our perhaps strongholds or something, or our weakest, whatever, right? You are wanting to investigate an existing situation so that hopefully by the time you get to August, maybe you get more votes than you normally would have gotten those. But the other reason we conduct research is to provide solutions to problems. I received a lot of spam calls, well, not really calls, but spam SMSs. That is a problem to me. And in fact, it's a problem to many, many people. Every time my mother comes to Lusaka to visit, she is based in Chipata, she always complains to say random people call her about having sent money, can you refund and stuff. That's a problem, right? We can conduct a study to provide a solution to that problem. And in fact, the potential solution can be technical in nature. This is where we, as specialists in computing, will probably come in here. We also would want to conduct research to explore and analyze more general issues, right? Why that females these days perform better than males? Why is it, page number 67, why is it that when we look at the most recent education and statistics bulletin here, we see that the enrollment rates as they relate to, I don't know if we have gender distributions here. Why is it that these are what? Progression or transition rates? Why is it that there are significantly greater, not significantly, but they're greater for females than males, right? I don't know if you look at grade 7, 8 here, 78.2 for male and 79.4 for females. Here's something else that usually has come up over and over again as far as education is concerned. Performance consistent in the last couple of years at grade 12 is such that females perform better than males, right? Would be interested in conducting a study or research to explore and analyze that sort of general issue here. We know though, right? Nothing against the females. We can't conclude to say females are more intelligent than males in Zambia. There's a correlation, I guess, between gender and performance, but we know, right? Girl child, this song has been sung for the last couple of years here. But the other reason why we conduct research is to construct or create new procedures, for instance, or new systems, or to explain. In fact, if you look at new systems here, most of you, if you're conducting your masters, most of you are going to ultimately build some system maybe that does things better than the way things are currently done, right? Better than status quo, if you will. Some of you, I know I'm co-supervising a doctoral student who is proposing a framework, right? That can be a procedure, if you will. We also conduct, research to explain a phenomenon or to generate new knowledge. Or, as Hasi and Hasi mentioned here, like in terms of reasons why I conduct research, a combination of all these different things. Now, the reason why I want us to really digest slide number 67 here is it turns out that the why we undertake research is directly tied to what is going to come up over and over again, what is so novel about what it is you're doing, right? So the novelty in what you're doing will probably, for some of you, to manifest itself in your algorithm. Those of you perhaps that are doing mainstream computer science and maybe mainstream AI, okay? It could be that you'd be interested in explaining a phenomenon if you're doing IT or IS, okay, or perhaps health informatics and things of that sort, right? So reasons as to why we conduct research, and I imagine I imagine that there are probably other things that we can add here. We do it for fun sometimes, is it? They call it curiosity-driven research, right? There are people that, well, if you look at studies that we conduct, most of the studies we conduct in this part of the world, they're usually focused on addressing a real-world challenge, okay, poverty and all those things, yeah. But also in the world, people actually do what's called curiosity-driven research, is it? You're not really, you don't have an end goal in sight, right? You're just doing it out of curiosity. And usually, curiosity-driven research has resulted in amazing things like the internet, right? Nobody anticipated that the internet would become what it, I don't want to say what it is right now, what it was, because slowly it's dying, in my opinion, right? The World Wide Web, anyway, is what I'm referring to, not the internet. So a combination of two or more of any of the above, ideally. But what's important to appreciate, at least as one states here, is that the quality or quality research is the lifeblood of any scientific discipline. Okay, so without it, the discipline would stagnate, failing to advance past their current limits and understanding. This issue of quality research really is quite interesting, because the only person who has control over the relative quality of your research is you as a student, and perhaps your supervisor, right? Because it helps in policing to make sure that you're doing the right things. There's a master's student I'm working with. She's been silent for a while here. She's doing a Master of Library Information Science here. So our focus is really on information science. And at some point we had a bit of a debate, right? It's like, but why are you insisting that I collect data? Also, why can't I just collect data from UNZA? I'm telling her, it's about the quality, right? Ultimately, at the end of it all, you want to be able to generalize your findings. Now, if your study is focusing on higher education institutions in Zambia, you have it in your title, you have it in your problem statement, but you're just collecting data from UNZA, you're going to find it extremely difficult for you to generalize those findings and argue to say your findings cascade or apply to other universities, like UNILAS, like Cambridge University or something, Kapsama University, right? Yeah, so quality is important, which is the reason why you're probably going to spend quite a bit of time with Professor Piri looking at experimental design. Anyways, other ways of thinking about why you may want to conduct research here is, I guess these are some of the things I was including for fun here, would be to make informed decisions. Okay, if you're government, certainly you need to conduct research for you to make informed decisions. If those of you that have been following the trends in the education sector will remember that at some point there was policy direction, there was a directive to say the language of instruction from grade 1 up to, I don't know if it's grade 5 or something, was going to be changed from English to one of the local languages. If you spend time on the UNZA repository and you do a quick search, you notice that research was conducted, right, for government to make that sort of informed decision, ideally. Anyways, you may want to conduct research here to because it's a need, right? So if you're somebody like me, part of how you are appraised is if you do research. And the only way you can prove that you do research here is if you demonstrate to people, to say, if you look me up on Google Scholar, you can check for my H-index score or something like that. Or you can look at the number of citations and all those things associated with my account, right? Ideally, is it? So you'd conduct research to do that. In your case, you're going to be conducting research because you want to graduate, is it? It's a requirement. You need to produce that, especially if you're a doctoral student, is it? You cannot graduate until you publish at least 2 peer-reviewed journal articles, right? In fact, you cannot graduate if you don't produce the manuscript, right? All of us, the master's dissertation manuscript or master's thesis manuscript or doctoral thesis manuscript. But also, I mean, you may want to conduct research here as a way of evaluating research in media, right? There are usually a lot of things that are said out there. The cost of living in Lusaka has increased to 12,000 kwacha for a family of 5, BNNB, right? I don't know, you may want to conduct a study to validate those findings, I guess. I know it's usually very contentious, especially Zambian watchdog will almost always have something about that, right? I happen to know a thing or two about how GSTR does that. It's very regular and systematic, the way that they conduct their study. In fact, they provide you with a methodology. They'll tell you which markets they went to go and sample prices, is it? Anyways, in my case, sometimes I'll conduct research to assist in classes, for instance. Now, this brings us to an interesting question as well. As we are setting the stage to introduce all of this, interesting thing here is that what we're calling research here, right, is actually or can be considered as a source of knowledge, right? A way of knowing things that are unknown. And if you think about it, you begin to notice that there are a number of other ways of, double back here. There are a couple of other ways of investigating some existing solution, or maybe I'll double back here. There are other ways of knowing something that is unknown, is it? Or adding to man's existing knowledge of a problem. I'll have to apologize upfront here. I'm going to use some examples that may be offensive to some people. I don't think it's offensive though. Like, for instance, through personal experience and intuition, right? I just have this feeling that I shouldn't go somewhere or something like that. That's a way of knowing, is it? Or personal experience, right? I have supervised over and over again. So through personal experience, I'm able to tell a student to say, if you continue down the path here, you are missing meetings consistently, you'll take longer to graduate, right? So I'm using personal experience, right? I can conduct a research study using the scientific method, which is the last part, the part we're interested in here. But personal experience is a way of knowing as well. What else? Well, other sources of knowledge include experts, right? Or traditions or authority figures. In fact, in this part of the world, the last two bits here, traditions and authority figures, for the longest of time, and I think still to date actually, are common sources of knowledge. Okay, so they'll say if you have a headache or something, you just go and drink, just go and soak a bark from that tree or something, and you'll be fine, right? That headache will go away or something like that. Or authority figures, is it? We go to church on Sunday and we listen to what that individual standing in front of us, typically a man, in some instances a female, is telling us, right? They're an authority figure, a priest or a pastor or something. Other sources of knowledge, experts, is it? I guess in your case, it's your supervisor, right? Your supervisor sometimes would, and this is me telling you, you shouldn't really take it by faith that everything that your supervisor is telling you is true and all that, right? They're human beings. They're not like the Pope. They're not infallible, right? They can make mistakes here, but you can consider them to be experts, is it? They're sources of knowledge, right? In fact, some of you are experts, right? In your respective workplaces, if you will. But I want to argue here that, not argue actually, when it comes to research, or rather, a more reliable way or a more reliable source of knowledge involves doing things systematically. If somebody stands in front of me, right, in church and tells me, if I do good, I will go to heaven here. It's like, okay, you're an authority figure. I am religious, by the way, no offense. Okay, you're an authority figure here, but how do we know, right? How do we know, right? But I guess we're not listening here because, they're an authority figure or something like that. Anyways, but I want to argue here that more reliable way of extracting knowledge or finding out knowledge involves being systematic. And the scientific method has actually proven to be very, very reliable. If we just look at scientific progress that we've made in the last few decades, most of the things that we see around as a direct result of the scientific method. The device in front of you, if you're using a computer or a smartphone or something, it's a result of the scientific method, being systematic, right? If that makes sense. Okay. So and you know, the scientific method is crucial because of course we are enrolled in a science-based program, okay, discipline. Granted, it's in the physical sciences here. Okay. So just to put things in perspective here, I'm just gloss over the definition of what science is, just to remind us here. We are really making reference, we're asking what is science here, it's scientific method and research. We are really making reference to a body of established knowledge here. Okay? When we look at the scientific method, the idea here is you go through this systematic process of, first of all, making an observation, right? When you're trying to identify a problem, you make an observation, or you observe. Through observations, you identify a problem, you systematically investigate that problem, and then you come up with an explanation, right, of whatever it is that is prevailing. We see that a lot of students get bashed on the Great East Road somewhere near Unza. I've made an observation, right? I can carve out a problem. I will systematically investigate that, right? And then maybe I'll discover that increasingly students avoid using the that pedestrian overpass, right? Instead, they decide to just run across here. But else, well, I'll say maybe the traffic signals here are not very visible, something like that, right? Being systematic like that. Now, it turns out the ultimate goal of science, the scientific method really, is to generate theory and to verify an existing phenomenon, ideally. Okay, so really this brings us to our discussion of the scientific method, which is quite instrumental to this entire course. Believe it or not, between now and I guess somewhere around August, all we are going to be doing when I'm interacting with you in stages 1 and 2 is we're going to be going through these stages, right? When Professor Piri comes in, you continue off with these stages of the scientific method, everything, right? So it turns out really that the scientific method involves or is associated with principles and processes and procedures that are regarded as characteristic or necessary for scientific investigation. So in other words, the scientific method involves making use of principles and processes that will enable you to systematically conduct a scientific investigation. Okay, so really another thing about scientific method is a process or approach to generating valued and trustworthy knowledge. There's some sort of guarantee. The thing I quite like about science, and I think you remember this from maybe your grade 8 or grade 7 or something, maybe they did not mention this, but the thing that sets apart science from these other ways of knowing, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't listen to the priest or the pastor here, you know, or we shouldn't really respect our traditions, I guess, I don't know. But the thing about the scientific method about science is that if you don't know something, you don't know, right? There's no room for speculation, is it? Nobody has systematically conducted a scientific study to tell us exactly what happens when we die, okay? However, the pastor, the priest will tell us that if we do good, right, we'll go to heaven or something like that, right? I don't know, right? If this is making sense about that here. But the thing about science is that it's a systematic way of generating trustworthy knowledge. And in fact, the beauty about the way you're generating knowledge is there's room for change, right? So if more knowledge is generated, you modify, right, your assertions. At some point, I think Pluto was classified as a planet, right? But apparently it's not a planet. We know this, is it? At some point, we did not know that there were millions of other Earth-like planets somewhere out there. Now we do know because of the scientific method. Okay. I don't know about beliefs, is it? When I was growing up, I don't know where this belief is coming from. I think it's religion, right? Heaven is up there and hell is at the bottom here. But we know through science that there's no up and down here, right? I don't know, maybe it was just a way of trying to abstract our understanding of what heaven is and what hell is or something like that. But anyways, now if we look at, kind of like research and research methodology from the perspective of, the scientific method here, what we see here is that research is essentially the application of the scientific method. Because in essence, what you're doing when you're conducting research using the scientific method is you are using a systematic process of collecting and logically organizing information and data. Like I said, I gave examples of, how we are systematic when you're conducting research. Is it from conducting a literature review and, analyzing data? So if you collect quantitative data, you're expected to analyze it in a certain way, right? Using inferential statistics or descriptive statistics, for instance. Okay, when you're collecting qualitative data like, I guess, document analysis or something, or archival records analysis, or using interviews or workshops, what you do is you probably do a thematic analysis or something like that. Okay. And then we look at the research methods or methodology. Again, all of these you notice are tied to the scientific method, is it? Our reference to research methodology or research methods is really the ways that you collect and analyze data, or the methods that you develop for acquiring trustworthy knowledge via reliable and valid or validated procedures. And this makes sense, right? Because a nice way of thinking about the methodology here is why you're doing it first, why we're doing it, right? The methodology is there because it's going to help us collect data. Is it? You're collecting this data because the data, there's a golden thread, is it? Everything starts from the problem, right? You have your problem. Your problem will lead you down the path where you kind of like come up with an objective. Objectives, I call these objectives because you have the main objective and specific objectives or something like that. The objectives. And then you have like your research questions or something like that. Now the golden thread, right? The golden thread is always the problem, is it? Or rather, let's just say the specific objectives. Everything that you do must be tied to this golden thread, right? When you're doing research. Right? So you have like your problem outlined here, and then you have these questions here. You have your literature review. You have your methodology or something. You have your results in your discussion or something. And then you have your conclusions, right? Conclusions or something. You see, your problem will have these specific objectives and research questions. Your literature review, they told you, and we're going to discuss this, that the easiest way of structuring your literature review is you come up with these themes that are tied to the golden thread, right? Your specific objectives. Your methodology has got to be tied to the golden thread, right? You're outlining how you're going to collect the data. And how you're going to collect the data has got to be tied to these specific objectives. If you're saying one of the objectives is to design I guess an intelligent piece of software meant to identify scammers or something on mobile service providers in Zambia or something, networks in Zambia, MNO networks or MNO infrastructure in Zambia, something like that. The expectation is that your methodology is going to have to explain how you're going to do that, how you're going to build that thing, how you're going to evaluate it, right? So, and if you think about these aspects to do with the methods of collecting data, right? Let me say collecting data. The way that you are systematic in the way that you're doing this, right? Using the scientific method, or you are using methods that are trustworthy somehow, because you're going to clearly outline measurement instruments, right? How are you going to collect this data? Well, I'm going to conduct a quasi-experiment or something. After I build this system of mine, I will select two groups a control group and a treatment group. Group will use the old system, and the treatment group will use this new nice system that I've built. Afterwards, we will collect data on people's perceptions, or afterwards we'll look at how quickly they're able to perform a particular task, and then we'll draw conclusions that your system is more effective or something. But also in the way that you not just the measurement instruments here, in the way that you who you're collecting data from, right? So the sample, or I'll just call it sampling or something. So the sample size, right? The sampling techniques and stuff like that. Anyway, the long and short of it here is when it comes to the methodology, and we'll talk about this when we look at the 7-step research process here just now in this lecture series, is that when you're talking about the research methods here, you're tying it to the scientific method because you're wanting to be systematic in the way that you're collecting and analyzing the data. But the thing here is that the focus, looking at the methodology, is the processes that you follow to acquire trustworthy knowledge, right? And this is very important question. They'll almost always ask, what extent can your findings be generalized? Or to what extent can we generalize these findings that they have here, that in Zambia, the fertility rate is 4, apparently. It's quite a lot, really. The fertility rate is 4 kids per female. They're not saying that all females are at least going to have 4 kids in their lifespan here. We're saying on average, I guess. We can generalize because we're being systematic in the way that we identified our samples, right? Yeah, so the sampling techniques and stuff like that. Anyways, hope this is making sense. I don't know if there are thoughts here. Now would be a time to probably just systematically kind of go through the so-called scientific process. And I usually tag this as the 7-step scientific process because a very dear colleague who has been unwell for a while here, Professor Kandelwa, I think he's the one who devised 7-step. I'm sure the other, I don't know if this is knowledge acquired from elsewhere here, but I don't want to claim this 7-step process to be mine. But the key thing here is it can be tied to the scientific method, right? So the research process, in essence, comprises of, we can view it as comprising of 7 steps, okay? And most of these steps are the things that we're going to be discussing in detail in the topics that we're supposed to cover in 1519, okay? So you start off by defining, I'm going to say defining a problem. We'll discuss this in detail just now. You then review literature, you formulate your objectives and your research questions or your hypothesis, or your hypothesis is this one. Then you prepare a research design, right? Or you experiment, right? You conduct an experiment. You come up with an experimental design. You collect the data, you analyze the data, and then you interpret and you report your writing here. In essence, when you're conducting research, systematically, you go through this process. Doesn't matter whether you're conducting this research in the public sector, like the government department, or in some private organization or something, or indeed as part of an academic exercise, which is what we are all doing, or what we're going to be doing when we're working towards our dissertations and the thesis. You go through these 7 steps. And what we're saying here is that you start off by defining the problem. And by the way, the definition of the problem is usually a difficult thing as well for, for most students, especially doctoral, I guess those that are pursuing doctoral studies, is it? Because because the problem, must not be something that somebody else has done. Please don't fall into in this trap I was talking about here, right? I don't know, this thing is taking on in Zambia, right? You're trying to run away from doing work here, figuring out what is normal about what you're doing. But you start off by defining a problem. Now, notice here that we're tying it to the phase of the scientific method that involves, conducting an observation. And the idea behind this is that if you look at science, right, everything starts off with an observation. You make an observation, is it? I have noticed that a lot of students in the first year computer systems and architecture course are failing. I literally observed that, right? Because for a very long time I taught this course. I've made an observation. Well, this is something that is bothering me. Why? It is bothering me because I want to investigate this existing solution, this existing situation. Or I want to see if I can come up with a workaround so that fewer students fail. I mean, I don't want a lot of students to fail in my course because I'll have to go and explain myself during the board of studies meeting, a board of examiners meeting. Why are students failing every year? A lot of students failing every year, right? And usually you say, I'll use experience. I'll use my experience here, personal experience, and I'll tell them, well, this course is notorious, and I've actually used this as an excuse early on in the process, right? Even I struggled with computer architecture. It's too theoretical, and a lot of students find it hard to understand, higher order thinking, if you will, if that makes sense really. But you start off with an observation, right? And really, you can think of what's happening here as, in your case, if you're in year number 1, in year number 2, one of the things you're going to have to do is, like it or not, you go through this process because you have got to define this problem. And typically, if you look at it from the point of view of the scientific method, a nice way of defining a problem is you make an observation, right? You observe something that is prevailing. If that makes sense. And usually, sometimes this observation can kind of like be implicit. I'm not saying here that when you're defining a problem, the very first thing you should do is, see it and introspect and make an observation. That's not always the case. In some instances, if you're lucky, I guess, I don't know, or if you are part of a funded project, somebody has already done this on your behalf. They've defined a problem for you. They'll just tell you there's this existing problem as part of this larger project. Or if you find yourself in a situation where you're stuck, you can't figure out what sort of problem you're going to work on. Every time you meet with your supervisor is telling you, well, what you're proposing here has been done before. I literally had a meeting with one of my doctoral students a few days ago, and they were proposing something. And I just did a quick search, right? I did a quick search, and I'm telling them, but wait a minute. If we just do a quick search here, this has been done, right? What you're proposing to do has been done. If you're doing this as part of your master's, we wouldn't really obsess a lot about it. But how are you going to justify pursuing the program or conducting doctoral level research and doing things that have already been done, right? Things with a non-solution. So what I'm trying to say here is that part of how you probably would kind of define a problem sometimes is you would, and I think I provide this, is you can read. And usually reading is a very nice way of identifying a problem. So you will notice when we start looking at literature review here that you don't just conduct a literature review, a literature synthesis just because you want to write your chapter 2 or section 2 in your proposal document. But sometimes you conduct a literature synthesis because you're trying to identify a research problem, if that makes sense here. But really what is important is to stress that as part of step 1, this is the beginning. And what we're saying is that the entire research process itself begins with the recognition of a problem or an opportunity to conduct research. And really, if you think about it, you begin to notice that some of these things that we're talking about here are tied to this definition of research that we spoke about, adding knowledge to the existing body of knowledge, right? New knowledge to the existing body of knowledge, right? The reasons why we're conducting research here as well, right? So the entire thing we are doing here begins with the recognition, that there's a problem or there's an opportunity that exists. And usually at the very beginning here, you must start off, you as a researcher here, you should identify the problem that you want to study here. In other words, and I think we should spend a bit of time, not really a bit of time here, but we should stress this point here. You must decide an area of interest. Unfortunately, I want to say this here. Unfortunately, and you don't fall into this trap. In your case, you really don't have a choice when it comes to the area of interest, kind of, maybe sub area of interest here. We have people that are pursuing, they're pursuing PhD, masters, right? Masters, right? In artificial intelligence. We have people that are pursuing PhD, masters in computer science. We have people doing PhD, masters in cybersecurity. We have people, and bear with me here because we have a number of people that are doing this, and so we must say this here, right? The people that are doing data science, the people that are conducting, people that are pursuing PhD, masters in health informatics. We have people that are pursuing PhD, masters in information systems. People that are doing PhD, masters in information technology. Now, if you're a PhD, right, and you're doing a PhD in computer science, they won't allow you, right? Nobody, in fact, your supervisor will not allow you to progress. You will take a long time. If you go out there and you're saying, well, my PhD is going to be, I'm trying to understand how people use mobile. I'm trying to understand how people use. Well, I'm going to say how I'm trying to understand the user to find out information-seeking behaviors of platforms, or usability, right? Yes and no. Usability of these websites that Smart Zambia Institute is churning out or has made available, right? I want to conduct a study because I want to see if these websites are comprehensive enough or something, right? You know how Smart Zambia Institute, they're doing amazing work, by the way. If you are associated with Smart Zambia Institute, kudos to you. I think there's some things that people don't really even know about, right? That they've been doing here. We've made significant strides here, I think. Policies and all those things, legislation, wonderful stuff here. Now, the thing here is like, you want to sit here, right, and ask yourself, so if you do something like that, right, what subfield of computer science are you contributing to, really? Is your contribution in computer science, right? Or, and you don't want to fall this trap, especially if you're conducting interdisciplinary research, right? Let's say you're interested in education. You want to be very careful, right? You say, well, I'm interested in understanding. Okay, I'm going to give an example of one of my doctoral students, right? I don't know if Mr. Tega is here. Nelson is a police officer from Malawi. He works for the Malawi Police Service, and his interest is in trying to see, how artificial intelligence, right, can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of processes, right, in the Malawi Police Service. And it's taken a while for us to get to the stage here, but Nelson is doing a PhD in, I think, is it administration or something, right, with GSB. If you're conducting a PhD in AI, for instance, you better make sure that what you're doing there is actually going to be a contribution to the subfield of computing called artificial intelligence or in AI, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that implicitly, you have already chosen an area of interest. And by the way, whether you like it or not, with the master's or PhD, they will grill you, right? Because if you've chosen to say you're going to pursue a PhD in AI, just developing some piece of software that makes use of, I don't know if application of AI here could be considered a subfield. I think you can argue, I guess, or something. But what I'm trying to say here is that you've implicitly already decided an area of interest. But more importantly, right, if you look at, if we were to use like computing as an example here, you are now going to have to decide if you're a PhD or a master's in computer science. You don't have to decide, right? What subfield of computing are you interested in? And I sort of kind of identifying these things here is the ACM has what they call the CCS concepts. So if you look at the CCS concepts, it's a way of classifying subfields, really. They have a very nice service or application that allows you to drill down, right? So your contribution in computer science and computing can be to do with hardware, can be networking, right? It can be applied computing, it can be security and privacy or something like that, okay? It can be, maybe go to applied computing here. If you look at applied computing, it can be applied computing to do with education and all those things. And so what I'm trying to say here is that if we were to use computer science here as an example, you're then going to have to drill down on a particular area of interest. And I say this because if you're at a stage where you're like some of my students who are, especially doctoral students, right, who are, I guess, still trying to find their way, still trying to narrow down. You're narrowing down on, I guess, what one would say a specific focus area. Taking a top-down approach is usually easier. Identifying a topic and say the reason why these concept notes, we see what you have, what you're calling a title here as just being a topic, right? Using that topic, you're implicitly telling maybe your supervisor or you're telling people to say you are interested in this. Okay? And I guess a lot of our students are interested in AI or something. Everybody's jumping on the AI bandwagon, right? That's fine. So you're deciding an area of interest. And then using that area of interest, what you do is you narrow down on a specific. Now, for you to understand, right, to understand this space or to narrow down on a research problem or to understand the problem thoroughly, it turns out that there are a couple of things that you would want to do, right? Again, it's tied to the scientific method, is it? You can start off by discussing these things, right, with your colleagues, perhaps. If you're uncertain, right? I'll use my student pursuing her doctoral studies in health informatics, Ms. Yangandu. It's been wild here. And I don't know if she's online here, but one of the complaints, I don't know if it's a complaint, one of the things she raised, right, in our most recent meeting, because we grewed her together with Dr. Mwindi, right, co-supervisor from public health. I just hope, this was closing remarks right after our meeting, our weekly meetings. I just hope that when we meet again, I want to be told that I need to go and read up again and confirm that these things have not been done. Both myself and Dr. Mwindi, his response was quite simple, right? Say, well, there's no substitute for reading. You have got to read, right? If you're doing a PhD, you've got to read, right? There's no point in you rushing. You say, I want to collect data here, because you're going to end up collecting data for stuff that has already been done. And you're going to have trouble trying to convince people that they should award you the PhD, right? If that makes sense here. So before, the long and short of it here is you're trying to tell her to say, before you even kind of like rush into saying, I want to start collecting data here, identify or define the problem. Part of how you define the problem is you talk to people about this. And she's already started talking to people. Like one of the things she was telling us, oh, I've been talking to people who are conducting this TB project, and this is what they told me. And of course, she's talking to myself and Dr. Mwindi, right? Because we are all experts in some of like these interrelated areas that are associated with her interest, a topic of interest. Okay, so you understand the problem by discussing with other people. Again, part of how you discuss with other people is you deliberately put yourself out there. Okay, like for instance, you say, well, there's a TICON conference taking place in Livingston in September, and they have the research track. What I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss with my supervisor, and I'm going to put together something, maybe a short paper or a poster presentation or something, and I'm going to submit this so that when I go there, I will speak to hopefully key experts that will be at that event. Okay, you'll be talking to people, and in the process, you're understanding your problem a bit more here, and you're getting feedback on what it is you're planning to do. What else? Well, you say, I am going to, even if I'm in year number one, I don't know. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to attend, I don't know when I'm going to attend the, I don't know if the same week is there. I'm going to attend the postgraduate seminar week. You know, this revised thing doesn't have the seminar weeks because they've been rescheduled. They haven't taken place. The one taking place in the School of Natural and Applied Sciences, which is where the Department of Computing and Informatics is situated, has not yet taken place. Even if you're not presenting, even if you're in year number one, just go. This is a week-long event. Take time off work and attend the event. As you are interacting with people, as you are walking through the poster, the posters that people are showcasing here, you talk to people about what it is you are planning to do, or your proposal or something, right? Yeah, because those people probably have something in common with you. But also you read, I guess, if this is making sense here. So that's step number one, right? You're defining the research problem. Can be hard at times. The beauty is when it comes to the problem, for some of us, I think we are coming up with concept notes because you implicitly did this at your workplace, especially our doctoral students, right? You're proposing to work on something because you spend so much time in your workplace and you've identified a niche area, an open area, and you've carved it into, I guess, a problem. The only thing you have to do is maybe, panel-beat it and, make it such that it's worthy of like a PhD level topic, if you will, if that makes sense, right? So you make an observation. The thing about spending a lot of time in an environment is, and I'll use myself as an example. In fact, before we get to step number 2 here, the importance of talking to people and putting yourself out there, right? If you look at some of the focus areas in my research group, if you look at the projects that we have, right? Most of these projects came about, or some of these projects came about because I was talking to people about things. Like, believe it or not, this Enterprise Medical Imaging in Zambia project, the project where we're collaborating with UTH and UCT, Cancer Disease Hospital, started off with informal conversations with a very dear friend of mine. He's a radiologist. He was a radiologist in training, a radiology resident at the time. For the longest of time, he was based at Northern Command or something in Dola because, so he's a medical doctor by profession, but he joined the army, Zambia Army, right? And so started talking about this and noticed that we had something in common, right? And came as a result of that. This project came as a result of observations I've made in academia, right? Most of what we do is tied to increasing or improving the visibility of research output. So the long and short of it, what I'm trying to say here is that talking to people is important. Putting yourself out there is extremely, extremely important. Most of these things we're doing, like road safety, for instance, project, is a direct result of us talking to people. Okay, so step number 2 is, now you're assuming here that you've made an observation, you've identified your problem, and again, we're going to circle back. I think in the next lecture series that we have, we're going to circle back and just quickly understand what it is we need to do for us to prepare what's typically called a well-framed problem, how we write a problem statement, but also how we phrase objectives and research questions, because they have got to be phrased in a certain way. You know, they have certain types of characteristics. They mustn't be trivial. You know, they must be clear and concise and all those things. They must be measurable. Okay, so you just don't say, you can't come up with a research question like uh, can we build a system for determining for a system for determining spam. I'm making things up here. Spam phone calls in Zambia, something weird here in Zambia. Well, you will notice that, well, we're going to circle back here and appreciate the fact that we avoid yes or no questions, right? It's like, yes, this is yes, we can build, we know this, right? But we have got to phrase it in a certain way so that it's measurable, so that we can design an experiment to test whatever hypothesis would be associated with the question, right? So you notice that the way that you'd, by the way, it's a matter of semantics. So you'd say things like, is it feasible, right? Or not is it feasible here, but what is, because is it is like a, is it feasible? Yes, right? What is the feasibility, right? Something like that, of building something like this. I know it sounds trivial here, but it turns out that how you phrase this question is going to make a difference between, no difference whether or not you're able to properly construct an experiment, if you will. Okay, so the point here is that after we make an observation, we frame or we phrase the problem, we move on to stage number 2, where we need to research the topic. Okay, and researching the topic manifests itself in the form of what we call, I guess, hi everybody. So just checking if you can hear me now. I lost my connection there, but I've reconnected. A thumbs up if you can hear me or something. Okay. Apologies for that. I'm just going to attempt to reconnect on my, I'm going to say here's some of the issues that I've been experiencing these last few days. I've been putting off, 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 I've been putting off trying out these other networks. I think now would be time to do that here, but just give me a moment and then I'll connect and share my screen here so that we can, maybe as I'm reconnecting, I don't know if there are any thoughts. It's a nice time to have a Q&A session or transitioning. I'm sure there are questions. Maybe it's because we're covering elementary level stuff here that all of us are probably already familiar with here, which is fine because we are, we are still introducing the course, is it? We haven't really started looking at the gory details here. Any thoughts so far? Okay, it looks like there are no questions or something. We're going to continue then. I was thinking that maybe there would be thoughts or comments about what we've discussed so far. Because we're still discussing we're just still contextualizing this. We're trying to understand the research process for that. Like I said, we're going to double back and then start looking at the specifics of what we do in all of these stages here. But I was saying that, after we frame the problem, after we come up with a problem, right? The obvious thing to do is you want to make sure that because the goal here, we do research. I'm going to double back here. We said we do research because we want to contribute, right, to the existing body of knowledge. That is key here. Now, if you're contributing to the existing body of knowledge, one of the things you want to do is to avoid reinventing the wheel, right? Lighton claims that there's a study they conducted where they built an AI models that are aimed at identifying students at risk of failing. Why would you want to redo what was already done, right? Pointless, is it? So to avoid falling into a trap where you start doing things that are necessary, but also to contextualize what it is you're doing, what you do is you conduct a literature review, a literature synthesis, right? You research the topic. So you go out there and you search for existing literature that is aligned with what you're proposing to do or related. There's something interesting about finding literature that is related to what you're planning to do, right? It's tied to a number of different things. Sometimes you conduct a literature review so that you provide auxiliary information, right? Background information. So maybe you're building some AI system, right? Some AI system that is going to involve the implementation of, let's say, classifiers, for instance. One of the background information you're going to have to provide is the different sort of estimators or algorithms that you can use to implement those classifiers. Okay, so that's background information. The other reason why you read is you want to explicitly identify the gaps in existing literature. Right, so sure, Period R may have conducted a study that ultimately resulted in the implementation of a classifier aimed at predicting students at risk of failing computer architecture at the University of Zambia, a first year course. Your argument could be that, as you are reading here, your argument, because when you're writing a literature, you obviously you state, the gaps and stuff. You say, well, the focus was on a specific course, a computing course. What we are doing is we are looking at trying to build this generalized kind of classifier, right? That probably will be agnostic of a specific type of course, if you will. Right? So you only be able to do that if you read, right? The idea here is you conduct a literature review to identify existing literature that is connected with the problem that you're exploring. Now, I mentioned the golden thread. If you remember, the easiest way of conducting your literature review is when you identify a specific objectives, right? Because as part of, you notice that when we double back to step 1, where we're defining the problem, we write the problem statement. We use the problem statement to identify the main objective. We then derive the specific objectives that are tied to the main objective. In your proposal, it's expected. There's a reason why in your proposal, you are told to say, I can't find that link here. In your proposal, right? Your research proposal, you are told to say, when you are creating a research proposal, this is the postgraduate guidelines. You'll notice that in clause number 71, right? When you start looking at the structure of your proposal document, you notice something interesting here. The fact that, or rather, forget about, the fact that in your introduction, yeah, clause 23.1.4 here, they'll say that what you must have in that document is the statement of the problem. You must include the aims and purpose of the study. And this is what I wanted here, study objectives. Right? Now, and research questions that are linked to the study objective or something. Now, what you begin to notice is the main objective will lead you down the path where you come up with maybe, not maybe, more than 2 or more, 3 or more specific objectives, depending on your level of study. Usually, each of those specific objectives can be used as a basis for you to come up with your chapter. If you are writing your proposal, maybe your literature review. Typically, your literature review will need to have something like this, is it? 2.1, 2.2. It turns out these can be phrased in such a way that they are tied to the themes linked to the objectives. Remember I said golden thread here. So if you have like 3 specific objectives, you can, at a minimum, you could potentially come up with themes associated with those objectives. Of course, you don't name them objective theme 3, but they're named appropriately, is it? If that makes sense, right? And then you are using, because these objectives are tied to a question like this, and this question is tied to an objective, you would analyze the question itself and the objective to try and identify, what do you call this? The keywords that you can use. So you use this as input to then come up with, and I can probably come up a set of 1 or more such phrases, is it? Because these days you don't go to the library anymore. What you do is you go on Google Scholar or something, is it? Or yes, you use tools like Elicit or something like that. But in this particular case here, you could say one of the phrases I'd want to search, if I'm looking for literature associated with this research question, is spam filtering systems. I'll just say phone spam filtering systems, right? That's one. I'll just say phone call spamming in Zambia or something like that. Spamming in Zambia or something like that. Now, what I'm saying here is that you typically would use your research questions and specific objectives to come up with such phrases, right? You don't, I don't know how you do this, but you've done information retrieval, I know. But you wouldn't go to Google Scholar and then you copy this research question here and then you paste it in here. Nobody does that, right? Okay, you can do this, I guess, I don't know. What you do is you kind of like phrase your search phrases appropriately, right? You're doing a literature search in this particular case. You're trying to find things that are related to this, right? So rather than doing this, you come up with search phrases, could be 1 or more, right? And then you key in, right? Is it? And then you start kind of narrowing down. I want to look at the state of the art, and I'll say I want things that have been done the last 5 years, or start with 2021 or something, so that I reduce the number of things that I want to read instead of
it's 6,100 here, I'll end up with 16,300 or something. And then I start drilling down, right? Now, what you're doing is you're using the golden thread, right, to identify literature that you would want to read, literature aligned with the problem that you're exploring. And I know most of us already probably know how to do a literature search, but I want us to spend a bit of time because some people are doing this maybe for the first time in 2019. Bearing in mind that most of these technical courses will not have a dedicated research methods course. You know, you think you know how to search for literature, but you discover that there are fancy things, right? Fancy ways of kind of like searching for literature. Of course, I mean, things have changed now, is it? Things have changed now because spam filtering system 2 here. Oh, this is interesting. Things have changed now because there are automated ways of doing this, right? And I would want us to have these conversations. I don't know how many people that are doing PhDs have come across tools like, let me see here, tools like Elicit, right? You know, I mean, the world has changed, and I don't know if now we should still even attach the number of years, but the world has changed now. If you choose like Elicit work in such, this is like, I mean, it works more or less the same way as this LLM, generic LLM, that is specialized, is it? So what you do is you can punch in kind of like a research question here, and what it does is, using that research question, it allows you to kind of like find, uses a research question. In fact, behind the scenes, what they're doing here is, they're doing this same process here, right? They're kind of like identifying keywords that they'll use to initiate the search itself, and then they'll analyze the results in your search engine result page on your behalf, so that you don't do this, yeah? So that you don't do, what is that? So that you don't do this, what I'm doing here, where you're keying in keywords, and then you're looking at this 16,300. They're doing the bulk of the work for you. So they kind of like help you narrow down on like literature sources here. The point I'm trying to put across here is that your literature review involves quite a number of things, and those things will involve they'll involve using you're assuming here that you're assuming here that your problem statement is well written, it's concise, and all that. We'll discuss that. We're assuming here we are done with step number 1. Step number 2 here, you're doing a literature search, right? Typically, a literature search will involve you. There's a couple of things here. You know, you're reading a broad spectrum of literature sources, journal articles, conference proceeding papers, book chapters, books, technical reports, theses and dissertations, web resources. In this day and age, YouTube videos, you can cite YouTube videos, right? So you do a literature search, right? You do a selection, you do a literature synthesis, right? Which involves reading, is it? Yeah, and the literature search itself, I mean, again, for most doctoral students who start off with planning to write a review paper, is it? So you do a meta-analysis and stuff like that. Yeah, you come up with a methodology on how you're going to search for literature and how you're going to analyze the literature and all those things here. I think you're going to discuss meta-analysis with Professor Piri or something like that. But anyway, so you search for the literature and then you synthesize the literature, right? You read, you summarize, and then you write the literature or something. You write it down, right? You cite sources and all those things. Anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that this stage we're calling literature review here involves a whole range of things, is it? Because when you're synthesizing, and I usually use this as an example, I use my doctoral thesis as an example here. When you, and I did this when it was tough, it was hard to actually synthesize it. It's easy now to synthesize literature, right? When you are writing these things, right, you write them, you're expected to write them in a certain way. You don't write a literature review in the same way that you write I'll look at it, but I organize this thing in a very interesting way here. I'll look at I don't know, guided thing would be an interesting chapter to look at, maybe reusable castration or something. You're expected to write this in a certain way, is it? You don't just randomly write a literature review. Most most students will fall in the trap where you are writing it in the form of a summary, right? Peary et al. Conducted a study where they built classifiers for predicting students at risk of failing computer systems and architecture at the University of Zambia. The results showed that the model was able to perform, I've forgotten the percentage here, with an accuracy of 88%. And then you stop there. No, that is not a synthesis, right? A synthesis is supposed to be a critique. Now, also, I don't know why we're having this conversation, but maybe knowing is easier. These days, you don't have to even stress also, right? There are tools, I guess, you can use here. But you write this literature review in a certain way. And then as part of the literature review, obviously, there's the issue of citation, is it? Remember I mentioned this is a rich or something. They'll tell you that you must, scroll down here. You must cite using, I've forgotten what I used here, but maybe it's, is it cite triple E or something? I don't know. I've forgotten what I used here. You must cite, UNZA tells you here in the guidelines, right? UNZA tells you, we recommend that you use the Harvard referencing style, right? We are recommending that you use Harvard. In fact, Harvard or, right? Or other, right? Or other referencing style. At the UNZA, by the way, because we have a number of disciplines, they recognize the fact that computing, for instance, has its own traditional citation/referencing style, is it? In computing, it's usually ACM referencing or IEEE, but IEEE is mostly reserved for engineering disciplines. It's classic ACM here, right? There's Association of Computing Machinery here that has come up with a way of doing this. So it's about citing work here. But of course, these days you have tools, is it, that you can use, right? Bibliographic management software tools, and then we can gloss over those things and have a discussion, so that when we start writing, we don't accidentally mix up the references, right? Citation 1 is pointing to a reference entry that is completely different. You can automate that process, right? If you're typesetting, which is what I did, by the way, with my dissertation, if you're typesetting, I've forgotten what it is here. But if you're typesetting, you can actually, you don't have to worry about this, right? So this was authored using LaTeX, and with LaTeX, you don't really have to worry about adding these references. Is it? You just use BibTeX. The entire process is automated, right? And I think we should probably have a conversation about this. It's usually sad when, I'll say it here, when our students write very strange looking word formatted documents that are a bit off here, right? When paper, when you can typeset your document, right? So what I mean by typesetting here is you can do something like this. So you use a markup language called LaTeX, and in fact, I can probably just open it up using Kate, because Kate is standard editor here. You use a markup language called, I think we're going to discuss this with Professor Peary, I think, but use a markup language called LaTeX, like this. It's simple, and then towards the end, right, what you do is you just you insert your bibliography, right? This. So in essence, I have a bib file here with this name. There's a file for this with the extension .bib, right? So if I go in here and I attempt to find the .bib file, I'll find it. It's right here. So you format it in a certain way. And I'm sure some of you have seen this, right? You've noticed that when you when you go to your typical publication, in fact, even Google Scholar, right? When you're searching for literature in Google Scholar, I don't know if you guys have seen this. If I want to cite this, I want to include this literature here in my study. What I can do is when I click on cite here, yeah, what I can do is I can, somewhere at the bottom here, those of you that have used Google Scholar before, you notice that I can export this. I can just copy an already formatted kind of entry here if I'm using APA or APA or whatever, but there's no IEEE, or I can export this to BibTeX, right? When I do an export, what Google Scholar does is it gives me access to this BibTeX formatted reference entry. This is what you add in your BibTeX file here. If you notice this, it's an easy to follow syntax read, and what you do in your document is you just point to this thing. So you use tags like cite or cite p or something. So in here, if I search for this entry, I'll be able to find it somewhere. Where are you? I'll be able to find it formatted properly, appropriate here. So you see this. So I just tag it like so, and when I compile this thing, right? When I compile this, it's a beautiful thing, by the way. When I compile this thing, I mean the output. When I compile it, you need to PDF LaTeX or something. When I compile it, it generates a nicely formatted. You can actually even generate a device independent kind of document, right? LaTeX to PS, PS to DVI, and all those things. But PDF is fine. Right? If I open this, you notice that it's something that is, of course, maybe the template I'm using is really ugly here, but it manifests itself into a production quality output, right? Beautiful thing. That the thing about LaTeX is the philosophy behind LaTeX when you're writing, by the way, is that the philosophy is simple. You must not focus on anything to do with aesthetics and formatting. You focus on the content. That's it, right? No, oh, this table here, this should be bold, and it's not bold. You don't care about that, right? Because the markup does that on your behalf or something. I think it should be a discussion about this because I know even my technically inclined students in the recent past have been using Microsoft Word, right? I don't know if this session is coming from here, but the literature review, right? You read. So we're gonna, I think we'll spend a little bit of time. I would want us to spend a little bit of time discussing this because it's important, right, that you identify appropriate literature associated with what you're doing here. Anyways, it can be a time-consuming activity. Of course, things are changing now. In the age of AI, it's quite sad, really. You know how even tools like bibliographic management software tools here, like Mendeley, for instance, are now being kind of like designed in such a way that you can actually use generative AI tools or features right within this bibliographic software management software too. So in the past, when I was using Mendeley, for instance, I would use it to add my, I don't know why this is taking a while here. I would add my bibliography here into Mendeley, and then afterwards, I use the PDF reader within here to actually annotate. As I'm reading, I'm annotating and I'm synthesizing the literature, is it? I'm synthesizing, and it's here. I'm synthesizing the literature, like so. Okay, so I read and then I don't know why this is taking a while here, but I read and then I highlight, I write notes and all those things. But the world has changed now. These things are kind of like integrated with AI tools that you can, so you can just prompt, I guess, I don't know. I would really love us to have conversation about the ethics of the extent to which we can use generative AI tools ethically, I guess, as part of the research process, if you will. So the reason I took time here is to just emphasize that this may not necessarily be a time-consuming process in this day and age, at least not in 2026 anyway. You know, it's not as painful as it was, but it's still I think it's worth discussing this because you're only as effective as using some of these tools. I think is failing me here. I don't know what's happening here. You're only as effective as in terms of using these tools. I don't know why this is failing here. But you're only as effective as using some of these tools if you understand the entire process, right? The end-to-end process. I don't know why this is failing. It's okay. Okay. But really, fundamentally, what we'll be doing as part of the literature review is, you want to bring clarity and focus to your research problem so that you contextualize it and you set it apart from what is already existing. In some instances, you want to improve the methodology. Okay. In your methodology, you tell people, I conducted a mixed methods approach, right? And then you cite Creswell and Creswell or something like that. Or this research utilized a quantitative approach or something like that, and then you cite, is it? Because you'd have read existing literature that outlines what the mixed methods approach is all about or something. But you also conduct a literature review to broaden your knowledge, is it? As you are reading, you are gaining an in-depth understanding of the problem associated with your chosen topic. And more important, to contextualize your findings. In some instances, when, let's say, you're conducting a study to do with what I was talking about here, Zambia Demographic Household Survey, is fertility rate, right? You're conducting a study tied to that. You'd cite the Zambia Demographic Household Survey to hint at the fact that the results that you obtain are consistent with studies that have been done in the recent past, if that makes sense or something. Not knowing if that is a question or something. I don't know if that's a question, or maybe Venon just accidentally unmuted himself from meeting again. Okay. And typically the outcome of this process, you'll soon see once we go through this, is you'll be able to link your research to existing literature, very important. You will explicitly state the gaps. Usually what most students will do is you have some summary table, right? You say there are these authors and the key findings are these, the gaps are ABCD and stuff like that. Okay, and then next up here is I want to argue that really formulation of I want to argue that coming up with a hypothesis here, educated guess, is really tied to, or is supposed to be a precursor to formulating of the problem, but doesn't matter really. Okay, so step 3 is, so you frame your problem, you research, and then you come up with, you formulate your objectives, your research questions, or your hypothesis, right? We'll have a discussion of what a hypothesis is, but it's more or less an educated guess, is it? You're making a prediction of what sort of results you're going to get ideally. Okay? I don't want to waste time here in terms of the objectives because I think I already made mention of what an objective is here, what you're setting out to do in your study, right? And I mentioned that objectives of 2 types. You have a main objective, which comes from your problem statement, and then using your main objective, you identify your specific objectives or your sub-objectives, ideally. Okay. Anyway, so really the difference between the main objectives and specific objectives really is simply that the main objective is your overall statement, right, tied to the main study. But when you have a main study, a general study, it will lead you down the path where you do a whole range of things. The goal of my research is to explore, this is one of my students, explore how we can automate sign language interpretation in educational settings in Zambia or something like that. Now, if you look at that broad statement here, that's the main objective, right? He's already identified a problem or something like that. The range of things he's going to do. Like for one, he will need to understand how Zambian sign language interpretation is actually conducted. That's a specific objective. He will need to probably figure out whether it's feasible to implement an automated Zambian sign language interpretation system or something. What else? You need to evaluate whatever he's going to implement. So you notice that coming from a main objective where you're trying to automate sign language interpretation, you end up with a number of sub-objectives or specific objectives. Each will be tied to a research question, and your research question will lead down the path where each of those things will have a dedicated methodological approach. The overarching research approach may be the same. You say it's a mixed methods approach where we will collect both quantitative and qualitative data, right? But the overall goal is the same, is it? And then the specific objectives will have different measurement instruments, different techniques, right? Like the feasibility of building a system will require that you maybe use established software development methodologies, right? So part of what you're going to write is, well, we're going to use Scrum or something, or feature-driven development to build this system. Where we'll be engaging with key stakeholders that will help us test and refine the system and all those things. But the evaluation may be done differently. So we say, we're going to conduct a longitudinal study where we'll deploy this system and then leave it to be used over maybe a term or something for 3 months. And then we will interact with individuals that have hearing impairments to evaluate. Okay, so specific objectives and main objectives, ideally. Okay, so the specific objectives are really just detailed, measurable steps. And this is where it becomes important for you to be methodical and systematic in how you are phrasing these things. The specific objectives are ideally supposed to be measurable. In other words, and we discussed this, using a specific objective, you must be able to design an experiment that will enable you to collect data. The data is what is going to help answer the research question. So you use certain keywords, right? Like to evaluate the effectiveness, to evaluate the efficiency, to evaluate the usefulness, to evaluate the ease of use, right? To determine the feasibility. What you're telling people is that if you are saying to determine the effectiveness of this automated sign language interpretation system, what you're telling people is that you are going to measure effectiveness. So you have to define what effectiveness is. And in terms of collection of data, what specific data attributes are going to help you measure the effectiveness? If that makes sense. I have a kind of like a series of examples. I think there's a paper that I have to apologize, I'm going to force you to read. There's this publication that we authored with some of my students, diligent students. It resulted in some conference paper here. But if you start looking at the objectives in here, I don't know if we explicitly included them in here because for brevity sometimes you wouldn't. There we go. I'm going to download this here. The idea is if you have, I'm going to revisit this, I guess. If you have specific objectives like this, to quantify Wikipedia content creation and contribution in Zambia, what you're telling people is you are going to design an experiment that will enable you to collect, that will help you quantify content creation, right? So quantify, how are you going to quantify, right? It's numbers here, right? So if you go to your methodology section in this paper, you'll notice that we are quantifying content contribution. And these are results really. But if you go to the methodology, you'll notice that we explain how we were quantifying. Where is that? How we were quantifying. Here we go, here. So we're providing methodological approaches that were used to quantify. Okay. What else is there? Well, the other example here is, and I'll leave you with this here, to determine levels of awareness and willingness to create and contribute content contribution. It's like, how are you going to determine people's relative levels of awareness and willingness? Well, we can conduct an experiment in the form of designing an online survey, a questionnaire, right? A questionnaire that will be designed in such a way that we are able to collect, where is that? We're able to collect the data that we need. I need to go to the methodology. There we go. We're going to design a questionnaire In that questionnaire, we'll have questionnaire items that will enable us to measure willingness, awareness. But anyway, the point here is that you want to be, you notice that we'll place an emphasis on how exactly you write these questions. And of course, we don't want a situation where they'll tell you, the examiners, no, the research questions are not well written or something like that. They're too trivial. So the candidate has passed with moderate corrections. You can avoid that. You remember the outcomes, colleagues, where we said, where we said that you can, and I'll just use, this is what, yeah, the examiner's report for Toastmasters. You can pass without corrections or pass with moderate corrections, right? The research questions are not well phrased here. The candidates need to rewrite them and consult the supervisor and all those things. But anyways, so that's the kind of like the hypothesis, right? And then comes testing with experiments, right? By the way, I'm referring close to the scientific method here, but you notice that there are steps here, 7-step research process. Step 3, formulate objective research questions and the hypothesis. Step 4, you come up with an experimental design or a research design. Sometimes it's called a study design. Okay? Now, the thing here is that the study design actually is probably one of the most crucial aspects of your research. Okay, because it's the one that's going to dictate the data you're going to collect to answer your research questions. But the key thing here is you want to be systematic. Okay, you want to be systematic in terms of how you're doing this. I don't know if I mentioned a lot of things here. You are going to discuss this at length with Professor Piri here, but when you are designing a study, you take into account a broad spectrum of things here, beginning with things like, depending on where you're coming from here, maybe the theoretical underpinning or something. I don't know, right? We do a lot of data mining research with my students, and so most of what we do, right, in the methodology, we include this. We include things like this. So in the methodology, this, you notice here, the study was conducted following the standard CRISP-DM data model or something like that. And you can look at this as like a theoretical underpinning to a certain extent, right? Depending on where you're coming from, things to do with conceptual framework and theoretical frameworks can be lumped into the introduction. If you get to a stage where you're caught in between or you're having this argument with your supervisor, remind your supervisor that there are guidelines on where you're supposed to include the theoretical framework, right? The conceptual framework or theoretical framework or something. By the way, the conceptual framework, the theoretical framework is mandatory for, this is mandatory for, I want to get to the stage here, because we usually almost always have this thing when our students are defending their proposals. When you're defending your proposal, just take note here. If you're a doctoral student, whether you like it or not, you must include the theoretical framework. But if you're a master's student, it's optional. But if your supervisor insists, you must do that. Okay? So anyways, the methodology itself is quite interesting because you're including a whole range of things in your methodology, isn't it? Typically, start off here by reminding us that the things that you do in your literature review, I'm going to double back a bit here, they'll find themselves in a proposal and in the final report, and in whatever publications they're going to author. Okay? And if it's in the proposal document, it would be like a section 3, which is the literature review or something. Section 2 rather. If it's in your final report, which is a long document, it would be chapter 3, typically, right? You call it literature review, or related work, or background, or whatever we want to call it. I don't know. But the methodology, right? The nice thing about the methodology is you think about the things that you are going to put in, if it's a proposal, in your proposal document, I would say final report here. I call this a manuscript, thesis/dissertation manuscript or something like that. Right? Proposal document, right? You have you usually, if you look at the structure of research, which I think you discussed for CSC or something, you have your abstract, you have your introduction, right? And then you have literature review. Then the other stuff here, is it the usual? I mean, the thing here, they're there in the guidelines, methodology, anticipated outcomes, references, and stuff. In your we are here. In your dissertation, you're still going to have abstract, your plenary pages, and all those things. Then you have your chapter 1, right? Is your introduction. And then you have your chapter 2, what we've just discussed, which is related work or something. And then for the methodology, it's going to appear in your chapter 3. Now, if you're wanting to understand the methodology here, I want to draw attention to the guidelines first. Okay? And we'll start with the guidelines here. But also, in addition to the guidelines, what you must do at your own time is, especially when you get to this stage of perseverance, and I see this thing is not quick, you go and download theses and dissertations from the UNZA repository. And I have a number of documents which we've done studies with my students, but it's neither here nor there. I can use that, maybe not. But when you go to the repository, right, what you notice is that there's a pattern. All of these students, right, when they are writing their dissertation, can I find main? So I was trying to check if 1, 2, 3, because I have a number of documents that I've downloaded in the past from the UNZA repository. It's down for some weird reason here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to see if I can open some of these documents here as examples so that you get the point here. What you notice, right, irrespective of where this dissertation is coming from, I have no idea, classroom practices. This is a dissertation, is a Master of Education in Science Education, right? Now observe, if we just go to the table of contents and we look at chapter 3, slide down here, chapter 3. What you notice is, and I guess we'll discuss the structure of research, is that the things that these people are talking about or are discussing in here are pretty much the same, okay? Doesn't matter whether you're doing computer science, whether you're doing engineering, this is research, right? Whether your research is in social sciences, maybe law will be different here. You will notice that there's a number of there are common things that they're discussing here, okay? If we go to this individual here, this dissertation, I know where this is coming from. This is what's scanned here. This is from 2007. Wow. This is a dissertation, requirements of Master of Science in Agronomy, right? This is a long time ago here. But again, if we look at, this is School of Agric. If we look at, and I have to apologize because we probably don't have something from computer science and I can't access the repository. But if we look at chapter 3, observe, right? Different terms here, but materials and methods, right? Different kind of things here, but experimental design, right? Some of the things that may be kind of specific to agric or something is a horrible example, I guess, I don't know. If we look at this, it's a horrible example, that one. Okay, this one doesn't have a table of contents here, but if we go to chapter 3, we don't even know what it is here. But if we go to chapter 3 here, you'll notice that the structure is more or less the same. This is chapter 1, chapter, I don't know what sort of dissertation this was here. This is horribly formatted here. Purpose of study. This may be a proposal, I guess. This is horrible. I don't know if this is a proposal or something. I can't find methodology or something. But anyway, the long and short of it is, methodology or something. The long and short of it is that you notice that everything that you download from the repository, all past theses and dissertations, are more or less the same, right? Because research is research. It doesn't matter if you are analyzing black holes, if you're a physicist, right? If you are if you are, there are weird things that people do here. If you are in the biological sciences and you're trying to understand bird species, right? There's an interesting study I found on the repository where a student, as part of the methodology, went to Osaka National Park and they conducted observations. So they would sit and actually count bird species. But it turns out it doesn't matter what it is you're doing. Everybody is expected to do more or less the same thing. And I'm looking for this document here. You'll notice that in your methodology, I'll scroll in your, what do you call this? The proposal document. Your proposal document is expected to have your methodology section. You name it methodology, or you can name it materials and methods because of differences in disciplines. But in the methodology, you must have your research design, right? In your methodology, right, if you notice here, in your methodology, you must include details to do with the study setting or the study area or site, the population, right? They've left out the other things here. I guess measurement instruments. So the long and short of it here is that in your methodology, typically what you do is you start off with an approach, right? You have your approach. So the methodological approach, right? You include things like the time horizon, something like that. So approach here. What Professor Piro will tell you when you look at the methodology is they'll tell you that the classical approaches are, well, we conducted a quantitative study where we just collected quantitative data, numbers that we can measure, right? We're going to use averages and stuff like that. Or qualitative, right? Or mixed methods approach, where you're combining quantitative and qualitative approaches. Okay, and then there's more things that Professor Piro will probably kind of like introduce to you, is it? Like specific types of the specific types of and I hope this you know, my connection is about to I'm gonna pause here for a little while. Specific types of quantitative methods, because I want to quickly I will need to quickly change my, I should have done this earlier, but I didn't apparently. My mobile device is, I'm tethering my mobile device and it's overheating. So the way my phone works here, and I do apologize, I was supposed to have done this. This is one of those 3-hour-long classes. I was supposed to renew my Liquid Telco subscription here, and this thing is, so I'm going to pause for a little while here and just ask if, as I'm just switching connections, my phone is still going to be on, but my computer will likely switch off very, very soon. But I wanted to find out if there are any questions. I think it's been nice to have pausing. We've been talking for 2.5 hours, right? This is 20 hours. So I wanted to find out if people have. I'll be surprised if there are no questions here. Surely there should be questions here, but I don't know. Any thoughts about this so far? The introduction, I guess. We are attempting to introduce this course here. I'm surprised that there are no questions. Maybe I'm offline on this. Can you hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me on my phone or something. Okay. Yeah. So surely there should be thoughts about this, right? So far. Maybe you have, especially those that, or contributions actually, because I know we have in our midst senior students. Maybe you have stories to tell about how you were grilled or something, or quizzed during your proposal presentation as it relates to some of these things that we've been talking about here. I'll be surprised if there are no questions. Surely there should be questions as I am attempting to to use this. Is that a question? Oh, yes, yes, hi.
Yes, it's just a quick one. In terms of the methodological approach, now when designing the research title, is how is it advisable to add the methodological approach in the title, or you don't just need to add it? What's the best approach?
Do you want to give an example of how you would want to add it? Where exactly in the title? What do you mean? Like you mean a mixed methods approach, a quantitative approach to measuring spam or something? Is that what you mean?
Yes, yes, in the title. Or
Yeah. Well, so there's no you can. I mean, certainly people have done that. You won't lose marks for that. It will probably, in some instances, it kind of it puts you high up in the ranking on your search engine result page or something. But yeah, ultimately, it depends on what the focus is. So if you know how sometimes your contribution can be methodological, right?
yes, Doc.
To say your contribution was methodological, yes. I wouldn't say like on what you are focusing on. By the way, for those of us that are wondering what Mr. John is asking here, he's saying in your title, if you look at the titles, some people will actually indicate in their title a mixed methods approach to understanding spam phone is it spam calls for various MNOs in Zambia or something, or for MNOs in Zambia. So his question was, is it advisable? I wouldn't say it's advisable, but sometimes, because your title is supposed to be, it's supposed to be, what they say is it's supposed to be, when you're coming up with a title, it's supposed to be representative of what you actually did. I'm sure if we were to invite an invited speaker here from let's say some of our students that were just graduating or something, or have graduated in the recent past, they'll tell you that they probably got comments to the effect that your title does not best represent what was actually done. It's a misrepresentation. You know, so in as much as there are no rules in terms of what exactly you should include in your title, but the expectation is that it should be representative. So in the event that what you focused on is methodological in nature, then certainly you do that. But you know, if you look at computing, right, it's rarely the case that you'll be doing that in a computing-centric field like health informatics, or maybe in an applied computing area like health informatics. But if you're doing like AI or something, you can. It's unlikely that you'd have something like a methodology, a mixed methods approach to understanding effective models or something, AI models. I don't think so. But usually you would obviously have that detailed discussion with your supervisor, right? They'll guide typically, if you will. Any other thoughts about what we've looked at so far? I'm trying to connect on my phone here. Any random thoughts about? I think there's a yes, David, and then we'll go to Collins.
Hi, Doc. So usually there's this contradicting thought that gives me a hard time, and I don't know how you can help me. So ideally, I find it challenging when, for example, you want to give your opinion, maybe in a paper. So the confusion that comes in is that you can't just give an opinion unless there's a backing, like there's a reference to your. So you find that I'm locked in. So I need to look at maybe a paper that supports my opinion, but if that paper isn't there, then I'm not going to give that opinion. So for example, I can't just say this bread is nice, unless maybe according to James 2019, blah, 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 this bread is nice. So you find that I don't really have that, the freedom to think outside the box until I find a reference that supports my opinion. How can I, at what point can I say, at this point now I can give my opinion without referencing somebody? I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense, right? And just to mention, and these are things that I so wish I would have had a chance to discuss, to have this very interesting conversation with you. But Professor P is the one who's going to be discussing with you. Or we can cover it in literature review. You know, in scientific research, right? They say, when it comes to research, in science, a statement is hearsay, right? Unless if it's backed up by evidence. So, and usually this is a trap that you get into, especially when you're doing your proposal, right? You're writing something down, and maybe the feedback that you get is the thing I like saying myself is I will jokingly but seriously ask my students, who said this, right? Says who, right? So anything you write down is hearsay, right? Nobody's going to take you seriously unless if it's backed up by evidence. Now the thing here is, where does that evidence come from? So it turns out that when you're conducting research, that evidence will come from two main sources. As you rightly put it, the first obvious source is existing literature. And I'm going to pause it. Sorry, I've just switched back to a different connection. Hopefully you can hear me on my computer. I hope. Thumbs up if you can.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
So they'll say that a statement is hearsay unless if it's backed up by evidence. So where does the evidence come from? Especially when you're writing down your ideas in the introduction, in your proposal, right? It's either it's coming from existing literature. If not literature, then it has got to come from results. So you will conduct an experiment. That experiment will enable you to collect data. You will analyze the data and then you draw your conclusions. Right? So in other words, you just can't, there's no easy way of getting around that, right? You cite a source or you conduct your own study yourself. Are you able to give an example? Maybe we can further expand upon this. I know people understand this, but maybe we can expand more on this by latching onto your example. You have a hypothetical example or something? Or not?
No, not at the moment, but I think maybe in another session I should be able to.
Because you see, the things, right? The things that this is interesting here. The things that you're writing about, the problem that is there, especially when you get started at this stage, is some of the things that you're talking about are lived experiences. Okay, and unfortunately, typically you wouldn't really point at what they'll call that's called anecdotal evidence, right? You wouldn't really use that, right? You either have got to conduct like a very preliminary study, or you find people that have conducted studies. Now, it doesn't have to be a detailed kind of study. Sometimes it can be a report, right? It can be a report. Usually is a good one here. It can be a report like this. Somebody wrote a report, or in this day and age, believe it or not, colleagues, you can cite generic web sources. Like maybe something was mentioned in the House, in Parliament, because this is documented, right? We've done this before, right? We've done this in some of the work I've done with my students. Like we've cited ministerial statements where there are assertions that have been made to say accidents are a direct result of potholes or something. But the key thing here is that, you know, there's no substitute for reading. Because it turns out that if you suspect something, right, it's rarely the case that you'll be the first one to experience it. Other people have probably written about it. It may not really be your classical scholarly research output, but you know, because they've written about it, you can cite. You can cite Facebook, right? Especially at the beginning, right, when you're still trying to frame your problem, as long as it's a reputable kind of like Facebook public page or something. So as reported in Zambian Watchdog and all those things. But there's no substitute really. You just have got to do that. Sadly, I don't know if any other thoughts. I've managed to reconnect, but I don't know if any other. This introduction is taking a while here, right? But that's as well. I think it gives us a bird's eye view or high level view of what this is all about. Now, here's the thing about the methodology here, right? Irrespective of where in fact, irrespective of whether you're reading a thesis and dissertation, a journal article. In fact, I would like to encourage you to those sources I was talking about. The other journal platforms like UNZA has the UNZA journal platform. So if you go to journals.unza.za, you will find a whole range of journals. You know, I've run into another mishap here, but I'm going to. I teach some weird courses here, and I do a lot of experimentation. So my 40 GB machine here is acting up. So there's no substitute really. I'm rebooting my machine again, but I'm going to pause here just to ask if there are more questions. I think I saw a hand up here from. I don't know if it was that hand, John.
Yes, Doc. Just a quick one. I
was by
used some few. I don't know if there are two methodologies that you presented. How many methodologies are supposed to be there?
Sorry. Can you rephrase again? And are you able to move closer to your microphone? Your audio is a bit muffled.
My question is, how many methodologies are supposed to be in the research paper, and why?
Oh, what do you mean? How many methodologies here? Are you able?
I saw the methodology part appearing in the first chapter as well as in chapter 3.
No. So then I see you're talking about this what they typically call the structure of research. You mean the examples I was giving?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks a lot. So for the examples I was giving, I said that you will write the methodology on 2 separate occasions.
Okay.
On 2 separate occasions, right? So you will find yourself writing, in fact, 2 or more, a minimum of 2, whether you're a master's or a doctoral student. Okay, so you're going to start off with writing your methodology and I just rebooted, sorry about that, in a document called a proposal document. So when because I know you're in year 1, and all other colleagues that are currently in their first year of study, at the beginning of next year, right, you will present your proposal. Okay? In addition to presenting your proposal, you will prepare a proposal document detailing what exactly it is you'll be doing, right, as part of your research. Now, in that proposal document, you will have an abstract or something, section 1, introduction, because this is not a long document. You have related work. and then you will have your methodology, and then maybe anticipated outcomes or something like that. Right? That's it. That's document 1 here. Now, towards the end, right before you graduate, as a prerequisite for you to graduate, you are supposed to prepare a manuscript. I'll call this a manuscript, thesis/dissertation manuscript. This manuscript is what they call a long document, right? 100+ pages. This proposal, the recommendation for UNZA is not more than 10 pages, maximum 10 pages. That's the recommendation. It's a short document, which is why it's segmented in sections. Now, when you're preparing this manuscript, you prepare it after you conduct your research, you collect your data, you analyze the data, you draw your conclusions. You write it down. When you're writing it down, it will be structured like in chapters, is it? You have an abstract, a chapter 1, which will be an introduction. Because you are now reporting, you will have a refined version of the related work. You will have the methodology, chapter 3. And by the way, the only difference between the methodology in the report and the proposal is that in the proposal, because you're proposing, it's future tense, right? If you use we here, we will use a mixed methods approach, or a mixed methods approach will be employed to conduct this research because you're proposing. Whereas in the report, it will past tense. We employed a mixed methods approach, or we use a mixed methods approach. But in addition to this, you're going to have your chapter 4, which is the results. And then you're going to have your chapter 5, which is your discussion. And you're going to have your chapter 6, which is your conclusion, right? And then your references and your appendices section or something. So simply put, you don't have multiple methodology chapters or sections in your document. It's just that I was referring to different documents. So at a minimum, for those that are doing masters, you will write your methodology on 2 separate occasions. If you're doing your doctoral studies, you are required to publish a minimum of 2 journal articles. So in your journal article 1, you will again have a similar structure, right? A journal article is not a long paper, it's a short paper. It will be segmented in sections. There will be an abstract. Okay, I don't have to, I have a document here I can use here. You have an abstract, you have the whole 9 yards here. I was showcasing this this document here. You have an abstract, you have an abstract, right? And then you have your introduction, right? In sections and stuff like that. Anyways, so just one kind of one methodology really. And all you're doing really is that, you see, when you're writing like a journal article or a manuscript, right? A thesis manuscript or dissertation manuscript, you are reporting to people about your research. It's a summary of the research. And because you are reporting a summary of your research, that summary must include the idea behind your research, the problem, the objectives, the research questions. What other people have done, because you are building on existing knowledge, the literature review or related work. How you conducted the study, okay? The methodology. The results that you collected, right? After designing your experiment, the results. The interpretation of the data collected, of the findings, the discussion, the conclusions from the study that you conducted, right? So what that you conducted the study? Well, the conclusion here is that we see that the threats to jobs as they relate to AI in Zambia are still unknown, right? Or rather, this will not really be a problem because the vast majority of employees are employed by the government, and it's not that easy to fire people, right? If you're in government or something like that. By the way, you can add supporting document here. There are studies, right? You'd be linking, this is your interpretation. You'd be going to your Zambia Statistical Agency, and then you go to those nice reports that I don't know if people look at these reports on reports to do with labor and human capital in the Republic. It's taking long here. Please, the people that are doing IS here, they do a study here based on based on websites in Zambia, right? It's weird here. I don't know. You know, sometimes I don't know what's happening here, but it's very strange here. What is typically prevailing in the Republic, right? We're still behind. You're still struggling with the system is slow or something like that. But anyway, so quite a number of things here. Now, in the methodology, right? Irrespective of what you check here. Let's say it's chapter 3. What the things that you do here is you include, and typically you organize these in, you can think of these in terms of how you are structuring, right? Research approach, right? Research design. I want to speak to some of these things here. You know, what I want to do is, this is usually my style here. I always force my students to do this because what we normally do with my students is we don't conduct a study where you just collect data using one instrument, right? It's multiple instruments. So we usually do this here, right? So objective theme 1 or something. Objective theme 2, something like that, right? Data analysis. What else? Ethical consideration. Now, here's the thing, right? In the approach, right? The usual stuff. We conducted a quantitative or a qualitative or mixed methods approach or something. Yeah? In your, right, this is like the overarching approach. I mean, there's you know, there's a couple of other things, and what you're going to do is, in case Professor Piri forgets to do this, if you want to understand the methodology, please look up Sanders' work here, the Research Onion. It is a classic, right? Because what he does is, in fact, he even has, I think, companion, what do you call this? I think he has companion videos for some of these topics that he discovered. Your methodology, the things that you include in your methodology can best be summed up using what what Sanders calls the research onion, right? You say you can view, I want to open this in a new tab so that I zoom in. You can view the methodology as comprising of these things. So when you're writing up your methodology, especially in your long paper, like your thesis and dissertation, they'll tell you must include the philosophical view, right? Are you taking a positivist approach, for instance, to your research, right? The approach, I guess, according to Sanders here, is whether it's inductive or deductive research, right? You notice these are layers of the onion, right? At the very top here, you mention the philosophical underpinning of your research, right? The approach, right? And then you have the specific strategy, right? They're calling what I'm calling an approach here. They're calling this is it a choice, right? Methodological choice here, mixed methods, you know, quantitative, qualitative, and all those. The time horizon. How are you collecting this data? Is this longitudinal where you deploy some application and then you wait 6 months before you analyze the data, or is this a cross-section study? We deployed, we launched a questionnaire, and then we collected data after 1 week. That's a cross-section study. Okay, and then how did you analyze the data? So these are the things, the key things that you mention in methodology. Please, Sanders' Research Onion is a classic, but also Cresswell. So I'll bookmark this so that when you have a discussion with Professor Piri, it's going to be more productive. But I'm going to come back here, right? And I'm looking at the time. I'm thinking some of these things we're going to carry them off and finalize the introduction when we meet next Thursday here. But so you have your approach, right? And then in your research approach is where you can include these other things like the time horizon, right? Longitudinal. There's a cross-section study, something like that. And then what I like to do is I force my students to say, when you're outlining what we're going to call the research design here, there are things that are going to be specific to the different objectives. If let's say you are building a system for spam, one of the objectives maybe is going to be evaluating spam system, spam filtering system. The other objective is going to be building or design and implementation of systems. Now, if you sit there and you think about it, right, the specific research design aspects associated with these, or maybe the other one is going to be, the other one is going to be, the first one, let's spice this up a little. The first one is going to be quantifying spam problem in Zambia, right? So you're going to say, I want to quantify I want to understand how bad this problem is. So maybe you say, I'm going to randomly sample subscribers from MTN, Airtel, and whatever, right? Now, you'll notice here, right? If one of the objectives is to quantify the problem to do with spam here, it's likely that, the instrument you're going to be using here will not be the same as when you're designing or evaluating the system. So in here, maybe you're going to say, the target population is going to be different here. The target population here may be MTN, Airtel, Zamtel subscribers. In fact, you can be specific here, mobile money subscribers. Again, the setting is going to be different. The study setting here, I'll call it study setting here, MNOs, right? It's going to be different from these other objectives, and I'll quickly walk you through this so you understand here. What else? By the way, these things that I'm talking about here, these are aspects of the research design, right? They're part of the methodology. Target population, which is why I have the full column here. Sampling techniques that you're going to use are going to be different. Maybe you say, I'm going to use random sampling, simple random sampling. Or I'm going to use convenience sampling. I'm going to use purposive sampling. I'm going to use stratified random sampling. I'm going to use snowball sampling. And you notice during a discussion with Professor Piri that the sampling techniques are tied to how you're collecting data. The techniques that you use when you're collecting qualitative data are different from quantitative data. Okay? So with that being said, there's going to be a match between the approach here and these things that you have here. Right? What else? Study setting. What else? Measurement instruments. Right? How are you going to collect this data? Well, I want to use a questionnaire. I'm going to use interviews. Semi-structured interviews, a different sort of interviews, right? But interviews. Workshops. Well, I'm going to do document analysis. I'm just going to read documents, right? You can do this. Well, I'm going to conduct participant observations. Well, I will conduct an experiment. This is usually quite common. This may not be here. It's quite common for studies that we do, right? Where you have an intervention. I have built this system that filters spam calls on Zambian MNOs. How do we know it's effective? Well, I'm going to conduct an experiment such that I will select randomly 2 groups from these MNOs, comprising of maybe 100. I start with the sample size, by the way, and the sample size here, I'm making things up here. I'll talk about this, by the way, sample size. But I'm designing sample size. Maybe it's like 40 or something. I'm going to conduct an experiment, right? It's a controlled experiment. And this controlled experiment is going to be conducted in such a way that I'm going to have a control group, group 1. They will not use my system. Treatment group, group 2, they're going to use my spam filter. And then afterwards, I'm going to compare results of control and treatment. And you're able to confirm that your system is effective if, on average, people that are part of your treatment group that are using your system see less spam calls or receive far less spam calls than the control group. This is, by the way, this is a technique that is used in the life sciences when, I don't know if you've heard of placebo medication, right? They design some drug, some new malaria drug. Oh, now we're going to use Coartem. What do? When you are sick, it sounds sad, really. When you are sick and you go out there, you'll be randomly given different sort of medication. Okay? And this borders on ethics, by the way, which I'm keen for us to discuss, right? So afterwards, they'll compare the two groups. Those that were given quinine and Coartem, which group recovers quickly, which group experiences fewer deaths. And then you discover that Ministry of Health will tell you, no, we've replaced quinine with Coartem, whatever drug they use these days. You know, but the long and short of it is the methodology comprises of a number of things. The research design itself, all of these things that I'm talking about here, you have to be systematic. You just don't dream about sample size. Our senior colleagues, doctoral students that were doing their proposal presentations, it was in the last year, beginning of the year, were quizzed, right? I'm going to collect data from 60 health practitioners. Why 60? The sample size. The sample size is typically tied to the population, especially quantitative studies. So there are these formulas that you use. The people say in the methodology, we're going to use Slovene sample size formula or something. Right? It's all part of the methodology. But we're getting ahead of ourselves because these are things that you're going to discuss with Professor Piri. Besides the research design, though, there's important things here. You have a section where you explain how are you going to analyze the data that you are going to collect. If it's quantitative data, you say things like, well, we're going to use inferential statistics and maybe descriptive statistics. Right? If it's, let's say, questionnaire or something. If it's interview data, you say, oh, we're going to do a thematic analysis. Right? More importantly, I think we'll leave it at that. The ethical consideration has got to be in the methodology. What are you saying here? In your case, they will expect you to indicate, to say, ethical clearance approval was sought from the School of Natural and Applied Sciences Research Ethics Committee, NASREC. In parentheses here, you say approval or reference number. You add your reference number here. And then also, maybe you could say C appendix A or something for the approval. What else? And then you include other things here like anonymization of data, but at the very least, they expect you to include these things because ethics is quite important in terms of research. I'll leave you with this here. One of the reasons why I would want us to start a discussion of ethics is because it's usually the thing that that delays progress. You cannot proceed, right? It takes a while. I don't know if I can find phrases approval here, right? So when they send you the approval, they will, I don't know if I'll be able to find this here. So one of my students, Fraser, just got his approval or something. And so what you do is you get this approval, and then you will you would actually add it as an appendix, and then you use this reference here. This is required, by the way, and we'll discuss this, by the way, when we meet here. But that's neither here nor there, anyways. If that makes sense. In fact, it gets even more complex when you're working on insensitive areas, right? Those of you that are doing health informatics, for instance, you will be required to collect data from areas that are considered sensitive, is it like health facilities. No health facility is going to allow you to collect data, right? Besides the approval you get from an UNZA recognized rec, what you do is you also get approval from the National Health Research Authority, NHRI, right? So you go here and you get approval. Where else? You get approval from Ministry of Health, if you're collecting data from health facility, right? Where else? You get approval from the actual facility itself. And I'm saying all of this because these are some of the things that you have to take into account when you're planning, when you're coming up with your timeline here. If you're one of those people who's doing, I remember there was a proposal from one of our master's students say they want to build this software that is going to track, is it vehicles to transport kids to and from school or something, so that you prevent school runs or whatever, something like that. When you're dealing with minors cannot give you consent, right? So you've got to get consent from the guardians, and so these are things to think about. But the long and short of it is that in terms of, and I guess I'm going to leave us with this here because I think it's almost time to go here. But in terms of, not be greedy here, in terms of the things that we're discussing here, what we're saying is that step number 4 is quite involving, right? Experimentation involves quite a number of things. And if you look at the learning outcomes from the course outline here, there's quite a bit of stuff that you're going to do here in terms of spending, the things you're going to do here in terms of, because that's part of the methodology here. Okay, that's presentation of findings here mostly, I guess, and design and implementation of research proposal. Or maybe if you look at the course content, it's a lot easier here. If you look at the things that are supposed to be covered here, quantitative techniques, all of this is a methodology, right? There's a whole dedicated team. What else? Research methods, where you discuss a scientific method, experimental research, the nature of evidence, all of these different elicitation techniques, I guess, all the measurement instruments that you can have here. The other stuff, I mean, there are tools that you can use, like when you're analyzing, okay, the world has changed. When you're analyzing quantitative data, previously you'd need to learn how to use R and SPSS and tools like that, but life has become a lot easier. Colleagues, I'm cognizant of the fact that we are running out of time. I'm going to pause here and just find out if we have kind of questions. In the next couple of series, I don't know when we're going to start inviting people here. I think when we start zeroing in on the specific stages. Remember, I guess we're doing a couple of things. We're introducing the course here, but we're covering some other themes here. It's part of the introduction. We're almost done with the introduction. We shall meet next week, I guess. Unless if there are any questions, I think we can leave it at that. We started thinning the head here. It was previous, we had quite a number of people, but we have very few people remaining. Oh, that's fine. If there are no questions, thank you very much. If I were you, I'd take notes and researching this, if you're doing this for credit, because one of the ways you're going to be assessed in this course is you will produce a research proposal that will be logical and coherent, that will include all of these different aspects. So it's not just the exam that you're going to write here, but the major deliverable is going to be a proposal which feeds into what you're doing next year. Okay, if there are no questions, thank you very much. Sorry that we went over by 10 minutes. Unless if there are questions.
Doc, just not a question, but just to find out, will there be access to the recorded session for this one that we just from having? Thank you.
Yes, it is. Now, I don't know if it's, I think we'll call this, I've been experimenting because I've worked in academia for a very long time. I've been experimenting with automating. It's crazy here. Automating things. Yeah. So yes, there will be. I will broadcast a link to the Google Classroom site, which I'm ashamed to say I haven't yet created, but I will create it. But for now, if you just look me up and you go to my professional YouTube page, you will find courses. Under courses, check for CSC 5019 in here. So literally after, well, I don't know if it's today, I'm preparing for a trip tomorrow, but by tomorrow, I will upload today's recording in this playlist. So there's a course playlist. And then I'll also dump these on, the Google Classroom site. So I try as much as possible to record all my lectures. I'm literally recording this right now. I don't know if you'd call this a research study, but one of the challenges I had is because these 3-hour-long videos, this is quite something, right? Because they're large in size, and so it's not really research here. Maybe it's minimal research. I couldn't find people that have done this, so I created my own script or something. I was trying to figure out how best can I upload this to YouTube. There are tools like Zapier that you can use to integrate this, but the challenge I had was these files are large. So the previous approach I was taking is I get the recording, and then if you notice, this is like 1.8, last week's recording was 1.8 GB. Yeah, you see this 1.18, not 1.8. So, so I've been probing around and I figured out exactly how I can easily move from Google Meet and things. So I will move it to YouTube by tomorrow. Yes, so they'll be shared. Thank you. I don't know if there are any other quick questions. If not,
how about the slides? Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's fine. The slides today, actually, like after this class, I will send a direct link. We don't have to wait until I set up the Google Classroom site. I'll send a direct link to Google Docs, Google Drive rather. So I'll share them. I'll broadcast them to the email I used to remind people about class. Hopefully that's fine. Any other thoughts? Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'll see you next week. Enjoy. And if you are a PhD student or something, very, very soon, I think you're supposed to be defending your proposals, right? The defense period is long past here. It was supposed to be done like now. It's probably in the next coming weeks, maybe a month or two or something, you should be defending. So this should probably be quite useful to you. Good night. Thanks.